He sent the desperate text to the wrong number, but a ruthless American mafia boss replied, "Don't move. I'm coming." If you want to see how this dangerous romance unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and comment down below. Part 1. The Wrong Number. Liam Frost's fingers trembled over the cracked screen of his phone. His left arm hung at a grotesque angle, the bones grinding together with every shallow, agonizing breath he took. The cold porcelain of the bathtub pressed against his spine, but the freezing temperature was nothing compared to the ice-cold terror flooding his veins. The wet heat of his own blood seeped through the torn fabric of his sleeve, mixing with the cold sweat of his failing heat suppressants. He was an Omega trapped, and the predator was just on the other side of the flimsy wooden door. "Liam, baby, open up." Caleb's fist hammered against the bathroom door, the wood groaning under the heavy impact. "Let me see it. Let me fix what you made me do." Caleb, his husband, the alpha who had bonded him 2 years ago in a sunlit chapel that felt like a lifetime away. The same alpha who had just seized Liam's arm with both hands and twisted until something inside gave way with a sickening snap. Caleb's voice was dropping into that silky, deceptive register that always preceded the worst of his violence. "You know I didn't mean to hurt you. You just make me lose control, Liam. Open the door." Liam clamped his good hand over his mouth to muffle a sob. Silence only fed Caleb's rage, but speaking would only give him a target. Vision swimming with dark spots, Liam fumbled with his phone. He needed Henry. His best friend Henry would come. Henry always promised he would be there if things ever got too bad. With a thumb smeared in his own blood, Liam scrolled through his contacts. Through the veil of tears and absolute terror, the names blurred into meaningless shapes. He tapped what he thought was Henry's name and frantically typed with one shaking finger. "He broke my arm. He's going to force my heat. Can't hold him off. 402 Elm Street, apartment 3B. Please." He hit send and let his head fall back against the tiles, praying to whatever was listening. The door shuddered violently. "Liam, I'm asking nicely. Do not make me break down this door." Caleb roared. His phone buzzed. "Who is this?" Liam's heart plummeted into his stomach, a new, profound dread washing over him. Wrong number. He had sent his desperate plea to a total stranger, and Caleb was seconds away from breaking through the hinges. Panic overtaking him, he typed faster, Messier, his blood smearing the screen. "Wrong number. Sorry. But please, husband broke my arm. Breaking down door. Need help." 3 seconds of agonizing silence passed. Then, the screen lit up again. "Don't move. I'm coming. Confirm address." Liam let out a fractured gasp. He didn't know who this person was. He didn't know if they were a prankster, a creep, or even in the same state. But they were literally the only lifeline he had left. 402 Elm Street, apartment 3B. Please hurry. Don't call police, he's a cop. Another buzz vibrated against his bloody palm. Stay hidden. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The bathroom door splintered inward, a jagged crack appearing near the top hinge. He would be dead in 10 minutes, or worse, bonded in a way he could never escape. Liam pressed himself as far back into the corner as possible, cradling his shattered arm to his chest, and began to count his remaining breaths. The banging on the door suddenly stopped. That was infinitely worse. Caleb always went dead quiet right before he unleashed his true brutality. He was probably getting his crowbar from the hall closet. Liam squeezed his eyes shut and waited for the end. Then he heard it. Not the bathroom door splintering, but a sound from the living room. It was wrong. Heavy. The apartment's thick steel-reinforced front door didn't just open. It sounded like it had been blown entirely off its hinges. Metal shrieked in protest, wood exploded outward, and Caleb's voice suddenly shifted from that dangerous, arrogant silk to something Liam had never heard before. Genuine, unfiltered panic. "Who the hell are you? Get out. I'm a detective, I'll have you." The wet, sickening crack of bone meeting drywall cut Caleb short. It was followed by a heavy thud, and then silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Liam's Omega instincts screamed at him to stay small, stay hidden, and not draw the attention of whatever apex predator had just entered his territory. But his human mind knew that whoever had just dismantled his alpha husband wasn't here to rob the place. They were here because of a desperate text sent to the wrong number. They were here for him. Heavy, measured footsteps approached the bathroom. They were unhurried, the confident strides of someone who had already won the battle and knew it. Liam's suppressants were completely failing now. He could feel the dangerous heat creeping up his spine, a biological reaction to the sheer, overwhelming alpha presence flooding the apartment. His body didn't know the difference between being hunted and being rescued. It only recognized that a dominant alpha was on the other side of that door. The handle turned. The lock didn't smash. It clicked open with the precision of a picked lock, and the door swung wide open on silent hinges. The man standing in the doorway looked like he had stepped out of a dark, violent fairy tale, and he certainly didn't belong in Liam's shattered, domestic nightmare. He was tall, significantly taller than Caleb, and dressed in an immaculate, tailored charcoal suit that likely cost more than Liam made in a year. Not a single dark hair was out of place, despite the physical devastation he had just inflicted in the next room. His face was a study in sharp angles and cold, aristocratic beauty, the kind that belonged on the cover of Forbes or a high-end fashion magazine. But his eyes were what froze Liam in place. They were a striking, stormy gray, cold as winter ice, calculating, and completely ruthless. And then the scent hit him. It made Liam's breath catch in his throat. It was the scent of a prime alpha, overwhelming, undeniable, smelling of rich cedar, dark espresso, and the sharp tang of winter frost. It should have sent Liam into an absolute panic. It should have triggered his deepest fears. Instead, a strange calm washed over his biology. His mind couldn't process it, but his body recognized something fundamental. The man's stormy gaze traveled over Liam with clinical, almost frightening precision. He cataloged the bruises, the blood, the trembling, and finally, his eyes locked onto Liam's twisted, shattered arm. A lethal, terrifying darkness flickered across the stranger's handsome face. "You texted me," the man said. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone, smooth but laced with a dangerous edge that commanded absolute obedience. "That makes you mine to protect." Liam's mouth parted, but no sound came out. His mind supplied a name he had never heard, an instinctual pulling deep in his chest. Damian. He didn't know how he knew it, but it felt instinctively right. Damian crossed the small bathroom in 2 long strides and fluidly shrugged out of his expensive suit jacket. The movement was practiced, elegant, completely unbothered by the blood on the floor. "This is going to hurt," Damian murmured, his voice dropping to a softer timbre as he draped the heavy, warm jacket over Liam's trembling shoulders. It did hurt. Moving even an inch sent white-hot spikes of agony through Liam's arm. But the jacket smelled like cedar and safety, a safety Liam didn't feel he deserved. And when Damian leaned down, sliding one strong arm beneath Liam's knees and the other securely behind his uninjured back, Liam didn't put up a single ounce of a fight. "Wait." Liam's voice came out as a broken, hoarse whisper. Who are you?" Damian lifted him effortlessly, cradling Liam against his broad chest as if he weighed nothing more than a feather. "Someone who has been waiting a very long time for you to ask for help," he replied softly. "Hold on to me." Liam's uninjured hand curled tightly into the crisp fabric of Damian's dress shirt as they moved out of the bathroom. When they stepped into the living room, Liam gasped. It looked like a tornado had touched down indoors. Furniture was overturned. Glass from the coffee table was pulverized into dust, and Caleb was on the floor. He was conscious, but barely. His right arm was bent backward at a grotesque angle, mirroring the exact injury he had inflicted on Liam. Blood was streaming from a deep gash on his forehead, pooling on the cheap carpet. 2 massive men in unmarked black tactical gear stood over Caleb, their suppressed weapons trained on him with chilling, professional indifference. Damian didn't even slow his pace. He didn't spare Caleb a single glance as he walked toward the destroyed front doorway. But just as they reached the threshold, Damian paused. He didn't turn around, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees when he spoke. "If you ever try to look for him," Damian said, his voice a quiet, absolute death sentence, "I will ensure they don't find enough of you to bury." Caleb tried to spit out a threat, but only choked on his own blood, letting out a pathetic wheeze. Damian stepped out into the hallway, leaving the broken man behind as if he had already ceased to exist. Liam buried his face deep into the crook of Damian's neck, inhaling the intoxicating scent of espresso and cedar. His arm was screaming in pain, his heat suppressants were completely failing, and he was being carried away by a literal mafia boss, a stranger who had just dismantled his life in less than 3 minutes. He was leaving his husband, his apartment, and everything he knew behind. But the most terrifying part of all, as Damian carried him down the stairs and out into the cool night air toward a waiting fleet of black SUVs, Liam had never felt safer in his entire life. The night air was a sharp shock to Liam's system, but Damian's arms were a furnace against the chill. A line of 3 black, armored Escalades sat idling by the curb, their engines a low, menacing purr that vibrated through the pavement. The street was entirely devoid of witnesses, no police sirens, no nosy neighbors. It was as if Damian controlled the very fabric of the city itself. One of the tactical men had moved ahead, holding open the heavy rear door of the center vehicle. Damian slid inside with Liam still clutched tightly to his chest, refusing to relinquish his hold even as they settled onto the plush, dark leather seats. The door slammed shut with the heavy, final sound of a vault locking, cutting off the outside world completely. "Drive. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him to prep the penthouse," Damian ordered. The driver didn't speak, only nodded, and the motorcade pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving Elm Street and Caleb's reign of terror behind. Inside the quiet cabin, the only sound was Liam's ragged breathing. The adrenaline was finally beginning to crash, and the pain in his arm was escalating from a sharp stab to a nauseating, all-consuming throb. He squeezed his eyes shut, his forehead resting against Damian's collarbone. "You're safe now," Damian's voice rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating against Liam's cheek. It was a stark contrast to the ruthless man who had just threatened a cop with dismemberment. Large, warm fingers began to gently stroke the unbruised side of Liam's head, the touch surprisingly tender. "Breathe for me, little one. We will be at my secure location shortly." "He's a cop," Liam managed to whisper, panic returning in a sudden wave. He weakly tried to pull back, looking up at Damian's sharp jawline. "Caleb, he's a detective. He has friends in the department. He'll track me. He'll arrest you." Damian looked down, his stormy gray eyes softening marginally as he met Liam's terrified gaze. A dark, arrogant smirk played at the corner of his lips. "Let him try. In my city, badges are just pieces of tin, Liam. He has no power where you are going. He has nothing. I own the streets, and I own the shadows. And as of tonight," Damian's thumb brushed lightly over Liam's trembling lower lip, sending a jolt of electricity straight to Liam's core. "You are under my absolute protection. No one touches what is mine. Mine." The word echoed in the confined space of the SUV, heavy with a possessive weight that made Liam's failing Omega instincts sing with an entirely inappropriate thrill. He was a captive of a highly dangerous man, plunging headfirst into a dark world of organized crime. Yet, as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, melting into streaks of neon and gold, Liam let his eyes drift closed. For the first time in years, he didn't brace himself for a blow. He just let the darkness take him. End of Part 1. Part 2, The Gilded Cage. Liam floated up from the heavy, chemically induced darkness slowly, his mind struggling to pierce through the thick fog of sedatives. For a terrifying fraction of a second, muscle memory seized him. He braced himself for the harsh, artificial fluorescent lights of the bathroom. He waited for the stinging slap of Caleb's heavy hand, the screaming pain of his arm, the scent of cheap industrial bleach that Caleb always used to scrub the blood out of the grout. But none of that came. Instead, Liam woke to the subtle, clean scent of expensive medical-grade antiseptic and something else beneath it. Something rich and soothing, like jasmine, sandalwood, and premium laundry detergent. His left arm didn't scream in agony anymore. It throbbed with a dull, distant ache, muffled by whatever high-grade painkillers were currently coursing through his veins. That was the first wrong thing. The second wrong thing was the ceiling above him. It wasn't the water-stained, peeling drywall of the apartment he shared with Caleb. It was smooth, pristine white plaster, accented by recessed, warm-toned lighting that cast a soft, ambient glow across the room. It looked like a luxury hotel, not a hospital. Liam turned his head slowly against the plush, down-filled pillows, his breath catching in his throat. Floor-to-ceiling windows made up the entire far wall, displaying a breathtaking panoramic view of the sprawling city skyline. Millions of lights glittered like scattered diamonds against the velvet black of the night. He was high up, impossibly high above the gritty, violent streets he had navigated for the past 2 years without ever really seeing them from this godlike vantage point. "Ah, you're finally awake." Liam flinched, a violent jerk that sent a spike of warning pain through his chest despite the drugs. A man in pale blue medical scrubs stood beside the bed, a sleek silver tablet in his hand. His expression was professionally neutral, his voice calm and measured. "Easy, Mr. Frost," the doctor said, holding up a steadying hand. "Your arm has been properly set. It was a clean break, thankfully. No invasive surgery was required, but you will be in this fiberglass cast for at least 6 weeks. The doctor gestured toward Liam's left arm, which was now securely wrapped in a pristine, lightweight white cast and resting in a dark navy sling against his chest. "We've also administered a high-dose suppressant booster directly into your fore," the doctor continued, tapping a few notes into his tablet. "Your hormone levels were dangerously chaotic when Mr. Vance brought you in. Your heat was threatening to break through entirely. You were severely malnourished and dehydrated, which compounded the physical trauma." Liam stared at him, his mind racing. He looked at the state-of-the-art medical equipment humming quietly beside the bed, the 4-line taped expertly to his uninjured right hand, the immaculate sheets pooling around his waist. "Where?" Liam's voice cracked. His throat felt like sandpaper. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Where am I? Am I safe?" The doctor offered a tight, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He made another note on his tablet before tucking it under his arm. "Mr. Vance will speak with you when you are ready. For now, you need to rest. There is fresh water on the nightstand right beside you, and if you require any medical assistance, simply press the call button on the remote. Good night, Liam." The doctor turned and slipped out of the room, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him with a solid, definitive thud before Liam could even formulate another question. Mr. Vance. Damian Vance. The name echoed in his mind, carrying the weight of the dark, violent rescue. Liam pushed the blankets aside and sat up slowly, testing his battered body. Everything seemed to function properly, except for the heavy, encased left arm. He noticed then that someone had changed his clothes. Gone was the blood-soaked, torn cotton shirt and the dirty jeans he had been wearing. In their place, he wore a set of incredibly soft, slate-gray silk pajamas that glided against his skin. They probably cost more than his entire monthly grocery budget. He swung his legs over the side of the mattress. His bare feet touched the plush, heated hardwood floor. His legs trembled slightly, but they held his weight. The bedroom was massive, larger than his and Caleb's entire apartment combined. It was decorated in minimalist, aggressively expensive shades of charcoal, cream, and silver. Abstract art hung on the walls, and even with his limited knowledge, Liam suspected they were original gallery pieces, not cheap prints. A sleek pocket door to his left led to an ensuite bathroom entirely constructed of white, gray-veined marble. It featured a walk-in rainfall shower large enough to comfortably fit 4 people, and an array of toiletries in heavy glass bottles that bore no price tags or recognizable brand names. Another door revealed a sprawling private sitting room. There were more floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive leather sectional, a dark mahogany bookshelf filled with thick volumes, and a sound system that looked like it belonged in a professional recording studio. But what struck Liam the most wasn't the absurd, suffocating wealth. It was the scent. Everywhere he went, woven into the very fabric of the furniture and lingering in the filtered air, was his scent. Damian's scent. Frost, dark espresso, and rich cedar wood. It was an undeniably dominant, prime alpha scent. It wrapped around Liam like a heavy, invisible blanket. To his horror, instead of triggering his fight-or-flight response, his omega hindbrain was practically purring. Safe, his biology whispered to him. Protected. Claimed. No, Liam muttered aloud, shaking his head to clear the biological haze. It's a trap. Panic began to bubble in his chest. He hurried toward the heavy double doors that clearly led out into the rest of the penthouse. He grabbed the brushed steel handle and pulled. Nothing happened. He pulled harder, his breath quickening. The handle wouldn't budge. Beside the door frame, a small, sleek digital card reader glowed with a faint, unforgiving red light. Locked. Liam spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He began to search the sitting room frantically. He opened drawers, checked under the decorative bowls, swept his hand over the bookshelves, looking for a keycard, a passcode slip, a master key, anything. There was nothing. The cold, terrifying realization settled over him like a bucket of ice water. He wasn't a guest in this sky-high mansion. He was a prisoner. A highly valued, well-cared-for prisoner in a gilded cage that cost tens of millions of dollars, but a prisoner nonetheless. Liam was standing by the massive window, his forehead pressed against the cool, thick glass, staring down at the indifferent city below, when he heard the electronic beep and the heavy click of the door unlocking. He flinched and turned. Damian Vance entered the room. He was carrying a silver tray. He had changed out of the blood-splattered tailored suit from earlier. Now he wore a pair of dark, perfectly fitted slacks and a black button-down shirt, the sleeves casually rolled up to expose his thick, muscular forearms. He still looked like he had stepped right out of a high-end designer catalog, and he still looked like a man who could snap someone's neck without a second thought. "You should be resting in bed," Damian said, his deep baritone rolling across the room as he set the heavy silver tray down on the glass coffee table. The smell of actual, freshly cooked food hit Liam's stomach, causing it to cramp violently with hunger. It wasn't the cheap, instant ramen or the stale bread he had been surviving on. It was a thick, perfectly seared filet mignon, roasted asparagus, buttery mashed potatoes, and a rich demi-glace. "I want to leave," Liam said, forcing his voice to remain steady, though his knees were shaking. "No." Damian didn't even look up. He poured a glass of sparkling water from a crystal carafe with precise, unhurried movements. "Sit. Eat. Then we will talk." "I don't want to eat. I want to know how to get out of here." "Liam." Damian finally lifted his gaze. His stormy gray eyes locked onto Liam's. Hearing his name in Damian's mouth was a dangerous, intoxicating mix of a hard command and a soft caress. It sent a shiver straight down Liam's spine. "Sit." Liam's legs betrayed him. His omega biology, starved for stability and instinctively deferring to the sheer, overwhelming alpha presence in the room, moved before his rational brain could stop it. He walked over and sat stiffly on the edge of the leather sofa. He hated himself for the submission, his cheeks burning with shame. Damian pushed the tray closer to him. "Eat first. Then I will answer your questions." "I'm not hungry," Liam lied, crossing his good arm over his chest. "You haven't eaten a solid meal in over 48 hours. My medical team informed me you were severely malnourished long before the bone in your arm was shattered." Damian's expression remained an unreadable mask of cold marble, but something dark and deeply lethal flickered in the depths of his eyes at the mention of the injury. "Eat the food, Liam." With a trembling hand, Liam picked up the heavy silver fork. The food was incredible, restaurant quality, bursting with flavor. The first bite almost made him want to cry. He ate slowly, pride intensely warring with his basic survival instincts. "Why can't I leave?" Liam asked between bites, refusing to look up from the plate. "Because you are not safe yet." Damian leaned back in the opposite armchair, crossing one long leg over the other. He looked utterly relaxed, utterly certain of his control over the situation. "You can't just keep me locked in here. It's illegal." "I can," Damian replied, his voice a low, smooth rumble. "And I will. You will remain exactly where you are until the threat is permanently neutralized." "The threat has a name," Liam snapped, a spark of defiance flaring in his chest. "Caleb. My husband." The word husband seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 20 degrees. Damian's jaw tightened, the muscles ticking beneath his skin. "Your abuser," Damian corrected, the word sliding out like a sharpened razor blade, "who is currently sitting in a private hospital room under heavy police guard, spinning a very elaborate, very convincing story about a violent home invasion." Liam stopped chewing, his blood running cold. "What?" "He filed an official missing person report for his, quote, emotionally disturbed and unstable Omega 4 hours ago," Damian continued, his eyes never leaving Liam's face. "He is laying the groundwork. He has every intention of tracking you down the second he is discharged." Liam's appetite vanished instantly. He dropped the fork onto the tray with a clatter. "Then I need to run. I need to get out of the state. Change my name, disappear. I can't stay here like someone under my direct protection." Damian's stormy eyes pinned him to the sofa, heavy and unyielding. "Because that is exactly what you are. I didn't ask for this." Liam's voice rose, desperation bleeding into his tone. "I texted a wrong number. You texted me." Damian stood up slowly, stuffing his large hands into the pockets of his dark slacks. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city he ruled. "You asked for help. I am giving it to you, whether you want it or not." Liam shot to his feet, ignoring the sudden wave of dizziness that washed over him. "You don't get to make that choice for me. You can't just claim me because I accidentally sent a message to your phone." Damian turned away from the window. The ambient light from the city cast harsh shadows across the sharp planes of his face. For the very first time, Liam saw something break through the cold, calculated mask of the mafia boss. It wasn't anger. It was a raw, burning, terrifying possession that made the breath stutter in Liam's lungs. "You are safe here," Damian said quietly, taking a slow step toward Liam. His voice left absolutely no room for debate or negotiation. That is the only thing that matters right now. It wasn't a comforting promise. It was a dark, unwavering declaration of absolute ownership. And looking up into those winter ice eyes, Liam didn't know if his fractured heart wanted to fight the monster standing in front of him or completely surrender to him. End of Part 2. Part 3. The Reality of the Cage. 3 days passed in the penthouse. 3 days of an agonizingly quiet routine that Liam both craved and despised. A private medical team arrived every morning at exactly 8 o'clock. They checked his vitals, monitored the swelling beneath his pristine fiberglass cast, and adjusted his suppressant dosage with cold, professional efficiency. They were polite but distant, treating him more like a highly valuable, fragile artifact than a human being. Meals appeared on silver trays exactly when he felt the first pangs of hunger. Carefully curated plates of roasted vegetables, lean proteins, and rich broths designed to rebuild his shattered strength. He was healing. His arm throbbed less, reducing to a dull ache that he could ignore. His chaotic omega hormones stabilized under the high-grade suppressants, pushing back the terrifying edge of his impending heat. But as his body grew stronger, his mind grew sharper, and it began cataloging the details of his golden cage. He learned the penthouse's silent rhythms. He noted the heavy, reinforced glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows that didn't open. He memorized the precise click of the magnetic locks on the front doors. He watched the stoic, broad-shouldered men in tailored dark suits who occasionally stood guard in the outer foyer. There were no exits. There was no escape. Damian Vance was a phantom during those 3 days. He would disappear into the west wing of the penthouse for hours at a time. Through the heavy oak doors, Liam would sometimes catch the muffled cadence of deep voices speaking in rapid, hushed tones, or the sharp, violent sound of something heavy hitting a wall. The overt, physical violence of Caleb's apartment had been replaced by the quiet, terrifying, structural violence of Damian's business. On the afternoon of the 4th day, the illusion of Liam's quiet isolation shattered. One of Damian's men, a tall, heavily scarred alpha named Silas, who moved with the lethal grace of a hunting dog, knocked on Liam's bedroom door. "Mr. Vance requests your presence in his office, Little Omega," Silas rumbled, his tone leaving absolutely no room for refusal. Liam's stomach plummeted. He had strictly avoided the West Wing. It was Damian's domain, a sacred, dangerous ground where the ruthless mafia boss orchestrated his empire. But a request from Damian wasn't a request at all. Liam followed Silas down the long, shadowed hallway. His bare feet made no sound on the thick Persian runners. When Silas opened the heavy double doors and stepped aside, Liam hesitated on the threshold, his breath catching in his chest. The office was vast, smelling of aged leather, expensive ink, and the overwhelmingly heavy scent of Damian's frost and cedar. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with heavy volumes. But it was the massive desk in the center of the room that drew Liam's horrified gaze. It looked like it had been carved from a single, solid piece of black ebony. And covering every inch of that immaculate wood were photographs, manila folders, printed documents, and heavily redacted police files. Damian sat behind the desk, bathed in the sharp afternoon light cutting through the blinds. He didn't look up from the file he was currently reading. "Sit," he commanded, his voice a low, vibrating hum that commanded Liam's biology to obey. Liam moved stiffly, lowering himself into the leather chair opposite the desk. He stared at the images spread before him like a physical blow. There were security footage stills of the street outside his apartment. There were internal police memos. There were his own highly classified medical records, complete with the specific details of the suppressants Caleb had restricted from him. He had never authorized anyone to see these. "What is all of this?" Liam's voice was barely a whisper, his good hand curling tightly into the fabric of his silk trousers. "The truth." Damian closed the file with a definitive snap and leaned back in his chair, steepling his large hands beneath his chin. "This is exactly what your husband has been doing since the moment I carried you out of that apartment." Liam flinched at the word. "He's not. I mean, we aren't." "You are legally bonded," Damian stated, his voice completely clinical, like a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Registered with the National Omega Registry. Married in a binding civil ceremony 2 years ago. In the eyes of the law, Liam, you are his property." The words hit Liam like a physical strike to the jaw. He shrank back into the chair. Damian reached out and slid a pristine sheet of paper across the polished ebony wood. It bore the official, heavily embossed seal of the city police department. Liam's own face, A candid photo taken on a day he actually thought he was happy, stared back at him from the top right corner. It was an official missing person report. He filed this 6 hours after I extracted you, Damian continued, his storm gray eyes tracking every minute change in Liam's expression. He is claiming that his emotionally unstable, heavily medicated Omega husband suffered a severe mental health crisis and fled into the night. He stated on the official record that you have been neglecting your suppressants, exhibiting highly erratic behavior, and making wild, unfounded accusations against him due to a dissociative break. Liam read the report, absolute horror turning his blood to ice water. Every single word on the page was a carefully constructed lie, yet wrapped in just enough twisted truth to be completely legally believable. Yes, he had been erratic, because he had been living in a state of constant, animalistic terror. Yes, his suppressants had been irregular, because Caleb deliberately controlled his access to them to keep him compliant and weak. Yes, he had accused Caleb of abuse, because Caleb had literally snapped the bone in his arm. But on this official paper, filed by a respected police detective, Liam just looked like a hysterical, broken Omega in desperate need of his alpha's control. He is actively calling in favors from his superiors. Damian's voice sliced through Liam's panic. He is utilizing department resources and citywide surveillance to track you down. He destroyed your physical phone, but he has already subpoenaed the cellular records. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending a welfare investigation. Your friends have all been interviewed. Henry wouldn't tell him anything. Liam gasped, leaning forward. Henry knows what Caleb is. Your friend Henry was visited by 2 homicide detectives yesterday evening, Damian replied, his expression hardening. They politely informed him that harboring a mentally unstable, bonded Omega fleeing from their alpha is considered a federal obstruction of justice, carrying a minimum 10-year sentence. They have built an incredibly solid, terrifyingly convincing legal case that you are a danger to yourself, Liam. Liam's breath came in shallow, panicked gasps. The walls of the expansive office suddenly felt like they were closing in, crushing his ribs. It was happening again. It was just a different cage with much better furniture. So, he wins, Liam whispered, a tear finally breaking free and tracking down his pale cheek. He stared blindly at the police seal. He just gets away with it. Legally. He always gets away with it. Damian picked up his tablet, swiped the screen, and turned it so Liam could see the highlighted text. The Omega protection laws were written by alphas for alphas. Your bond is federally registered. Fleeing from your bonded mate without a sanctioned trial is grounds for mandatory state counseling and possible institutionalization. If the court deems you a threat to yourself, they will force me back, Liam finished the sentence, feeling entirely hollowed out. The fight drained from his body, leaving nothing but an empty, cold void. If he finds me, he can legally compel my return. The courts will side with a decorated detective over a broken Omega. They'll label me crazy. They'll drug me, strip my rights, and hand me right back to him. Liam pushed himself out of the chair abruptly, his legs shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the desk to stay standing. Then what is the point of all this? Liam's voice finally cracked, ascending into a desperate, broken shout. Why did you save me? Why did you bring me here, dress me in silk, and fix my arm, just to tell me that I'm still trapped? That I never had a single chance at freedom? Damian rose from his chair slowly. He moved around the large desk with the slow, deliberate grace of an apex predator cornering its prey. He didn't reach out to touch Liam, but he stepped deep into his personal space. His heavy scent, frost, smoke, and violent possession wrapped tightly around Liam's trembling frame. The point, Damian said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper that vibrated in Liam's chest, is that I do not particularly care about the law. Liam's breath hitched. He stared up into Damian's face. Caleb thinks the legal system will act as his personal shield. He believes his tin badge and your registered bond make him untouchable in my city. Damian's smile was a slow, terrifying thing, absolutely devoid of mercy. It was the smile of a monster anticipating a slaughter. He is about to learn that there are far worse things in this world than legal consequences. You can't just, what are you going to do? Liam stammered, stepping back until his spine hit the edge of a leather armchair. I am going to do what needs to be done. Damian gestured vaguely toward the sprawling mess of evidence on his desk. I have been documenting his pathetic little crimes for years. His underground gambling debts. His sloppy evidence tampering. The 3 excessive brutality complaints that mysteriously vanished from internal affairs. The two other Omegas he dated who filed desperate restraining orders before you ever met him. Liam's mind reeled, trying to process the sheer volume of information. You've been watching him? For years. I have been watching you. The admission dropped into the heavy silence of the room like a live grenade. Something raw, obsessive, and painfully unguarded flickered across Damian's stormy eyes before the cold mask slammed back into place. He took another step forward, entirely boxing Liam in. He was simply the obstacle in my way. I was waiting for you to leave him. And when I didn't leave, Liam breathed, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. I waited. Damian's voice dropped to a rough, gravelly murmur. I would have waited forever, Liam. I would have burned the city down around him just to keep you in my sights. But then you sent that text. You reached out into the dark, and you handed me my opening on a silver platter. Liam shook his head, denial warring with a dark, twisted sense of validation. This is insane. You're talking about utterly destroying a decorated police detective. You're talking about starting an all-out war with the police force over me. I am talking about permanently removing a threat to what is mine, Damian stated firmly. He closed the remaining distance, bracing one large hand against the back of the armchair beside Liam's waist, effectively trapping him. He didn't touch Liam, but the heat radiating from his large body was intoxicating. The law failed you, Liam. Society failed you. Every single system designed to protect Omegas completely failed you. And you think you are somehow better off trusting them. No, Liam whispered, unable to look away from the burning coal intensity in Damian's eyes. I think I am a monster, Damian confessed softly, leaning in until his lips were inches from Liam's ear. But I am your monster now. And I swear to you, I will burn every legal institution in this city to ash before I ever let him put his hands on you again. Liam should have been terrified. He should have run screaming from the office, fought his way out, done anything except stand there. He was looking at a violent, remorseless criminal who had just admitted to stalking him for years. But as Damian's heavy, protective alpha scent enveloped him completely, Liam didn't feel fear. He felt like he had just been claimed more thoroughly, more deeply, than any legal paper or state-sanctioned bond could ever manage. He'll come for me, Liam whispered, his voice trembling as he finally leaned a fraction of an inch closer to Damian's warmth. I am counting on it, Damian murmured against his hair, his smile a dark promise of impending violence. Let him come. End of Part 3. Part 4, The Monster's Devotion. The medical team arrived every morning like clockwork. They checked Liam's vitals, monitored the healing progress of his arm, and adjusted his suppressant dosage with the clinical efficiency of machines. They were polite, softly spoken, and entirely distant, treating him strictly as a fragile patient rather than a person. Liam tolerated their presence, grateful for the pain relief, but hating the feeling of being a specimen under a microscope. So when Damian appeared in the doorway of Liam's bedroom on the 5th evening, holding a premium leather first aid kit instead of a silver dinner tray, Liam frowned in confusion. The bandages beneath your sling need changing, Damian said, his deep voice slicing through the quiet of the room as he set the kit down on the sleek bathroom counter. The doctor comes tomorrow morning, Liam pointed out, his heart picking up a nervous, fluttery rhythm at the sheer size of the alpha dominating his personal space. I know. Damian's expression was completely unreadable, a perfectly sculpted mask of marble. But I am going to do it tonight. Liam wanted to argue. He should have argued. He should have demanded his space and insisted on the medical professionals. But a bone-deep exhaustion had settled into him, and the thought of one more stranger examining his bruised flesh with clinical indifference made his skin crawl. Fine, Liam whispered, pushing himself off the mattress and following Damian into the ensuite bathroom. The white marble was cold beneath Liam's silk-clad thighs as Damian effortlessly lifted him by the waist and set him onto the counter. Liam's bare feet dangled, not quite reaching the heated floor. It was a profoundly vulnerable position, placing Damian directly between his knees, entirely invading his space. Damian washed his large hands with surgical precision at the sink. He laid out the supplies on a sterile towel in neat, methodical rows: premium gauze, medical-grade antiseptic, and surgical tape. His movements were incredibly economical, practiced, and terrifyingly steady, like he had done this 1,000 times in much worse conditions. Give me your arm, Damian murmured quietly, his stormy eyes locking onto Liam's. Liam extended his left arm, holding his breath. He watched as Damian carefully, almost reverently, unwrapped the outer bandaging that protected the skin around the fiberglass cast. The bruising beneath was a horrific canvas of fading purple, sickly yellow, and deep green, the lingering evidence of Caleb's rage. Damian's large, calloused fingers were incredibly warm against Liam's pale, shivering skin. They were gentle in a way that fundamentally contradicted everything about the man. This was the same man who had snapped a detective's arm without a flinch, who destroyed solid wood doors like they were paper, and who effortlessly commanded a criminal empire. Yet, here he was, treating Liam as if he were made of spun glass. "You've done this before," Liam observed softly, mesmerized by the careful way those lethal hands worked the tape. Damian's sharp jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes. Medical training?" "No." Damian soaked a square gauze pad in antiseptic and dabbed with featherlight pressure at a small, jagged abrasion near Liam's elbow. "I have caused a great deal of injuries in my life, Liam. Learning how to mend them seemed appropriate." The dark admission hung heavily in the steam-filled air, smelling of sharp alcohol and the intoxicating, rich scent of Damian's cedar and frost. Liam watched the alpha's face. He noted the intense concentration etched between Damian's brows, the careful, devoted attention paid to every single bruise and scrape. Being this close, Liam could see the minute details he had missed in his terror. A thin, pale scar slicing through the tail end of Damian's left eyebrow. The precise, thick way his dark hair fell across his forehead. The almost invisible, tightly controlled tremor in his large hands that suggested keeping his touches this gentle required a massive amount of willpower. "Does it hurt?" Damian asked, his voice dropping an octave as his fingertips ghosted over a particularly dark, nasty bruise near the joint. "No." The lie slipped out automatically, a defense mechanism ingrained by years of hiding his pain from an abusive alpha. Damian's eyes snapped up, piercing straight through Liam's soul. "Do not lie to me, Liam." "Why not?" "You're lying to me." "About what?" "About why you're doing this." Liam gestured with his good hand to the meticulously laid-out supplies, the careful, agonizingly tender ministrations. "You have a team of highly paid doctors on standby 24/7. You don't need to be the one playing nurse." "I want to," Damian replied, the words sharp, possessive, and utterly final. He returned his intense focus to Liam's battered arm. "There is a difference." The intimacy of the moment was hypnotic, heavy, and completely wrong. This man had brutally assaulted his husband. This man was keeping him locked in a multi-million-dollar vault in the sky. This man spoke casually about executing people. And yet, these dangerous, blood-stained hands were undeniably the gentlest that had touched Liam in years. Damian rewrapped the fresh bandage with meticulous care, securing it perfectly. Then, without a word, he reached for Liam's right hand, the uninjured one. Liam's breath hitched in his throat. "This one too," Damian murmured, his thumb lightly stroking the raw scrapes on Liam's knuckles. Souvenirs from when Liam had frantically scrambled backward across the bathroom tiles. Liam simply nodded, not trusting his vocal cords. Damian cleaned each tiny scrape with the exact same reverent attention. His thumb pressed gently against the center of Liam's palm, steadying his trembling hand. And then, Damian's thumb slipped lower, deliberately brushing against the delicate skin on the inside of Liam's wrist. They both froze completely. The exact spot where Damian's thumb pressed against the skin was a primary scent gland, one of the most biologically sensitive and intimate points on an Omega's body. Liam's medical suppressants were fully active, strong enough to stave off the crushing fever of a heat, but they were absolutely useless against this. They couldn't stop the immediate, violent way his biology recognized Damian's touch, clicking into place like a master key finding its long-lost lock. The air in the bathroom instantly shifted, becoming thick, charged, and heavy. Damian's scent violently spiked. The frost and dark espresso intensified, layering with something darker, richer, like burnt sugar and an incoming winter storm. It wrapped around Liam like a physical entity, making his Omega hindbrain purr with a deep, desperate satisfaction, even as his conscious, rational mind screamed at him to run. Liam's pupils blew wide open, swallowing his irises. His breathing turned rapid and shallow. And Damian. Damian looked like a starving man standing on the very edge of a cliff, staring down into a beautiful abyss and actively considering jumping. The muscles in his neck strained, his jaw locked tight. "Liam," Damian rasped, his name sounding like a mix between a dark warning and a desperate prayer. "You should go," Liam managed to whisper, though he made absolutely no effort to pull his hand back. For a terrifying, endless second, Damian didn't move. His stormy eyes were entirely blown, dark with an animalistic hunger. Liam could visibly see the brutal war waging behind them, primal instinct fighting violently against ironclad control. Want versus should. Alpha versus protector. Then, with a shuddering breath, Damian stepped back. The sudden loss of his heat left Liam shivering. Damian packed up the medical supplies with hands that were now visibly shaking. He didn't look back at Liam as he turned and strode quickly toward the door. He paused right at the threshold, his broad back rigid beneath his dark shirt. "Lock the door behind me," Damian commanded, his voice rough as sandpaper. Then he was gone. Liam sat frozen on the cold marble counter for a very long time, staring down at his wrist where Damian's thumb had pressed. The skin there felt like it had been branded, burning with a phantom heat. He could still smell him, frost, smoke, and total possession. The scent lingered in the room for hours, wrapping around Liam like a dark promise or a beautiful threat. He truly couldn't tell the difference anymore. Liam woke the next morning to the phantom sensation of music. It was the muscle memory of pieces he hadn't touched in years, his fingers twitching against the silk sheets as he conducted invisible orchestras and bowed invisible strings in his sleep. He opened his eyes to the soft, golden dawn light filtering through the massive windows. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and that was when he saw it. Sitting in the center of the adjoining sitting room, catching the very first rays of the sunrise like a holy relic, was a cello. Liam's heart slammed to a dead stop. He threw off the heavy duvet and practically ran across the room on bare feet, utterly convinced he was hallucinating. It was a cruel trick of his sedated mind, conjuring up the very thing his soul missed the most. But as he dropped to his knees in front of the stand, his trembling fingers brushed against the wood. It was real. Solid, breathtakingly beautiful wood. It had a spruce top with a grain so flawless it looked like flowing golden water, and a maple back that gleamed like honey. The scroll was carved with painstaking, delicate precision, and the ebony pegs were inlaid with shimmering mother-of-pearl. This wasn't just an instrument. This was a masterpiece. This was priceless art. Liam's throat closed up, thick with unshed tears. He ran his uninjured hand down the perfectly tuned strings. Something deep inside of his chest shattered wide open. It wasn't the cheap student instrument he had scrimped and saved for. The one Caleb had smashed into splinters 2 years ago in a blind rage over a burnt dinner. This cello was worth more than everything Liam had ever owned in his entire life combined. "Do you like it?" Liam spun around on his knees. Damian stood leaning casually against the doorframe. He was still wearing the exact same dark slacks and black shirt from the night before, looking as though he hadn't slept a single second. His expression was carefully neutral, but his stormy eyes held something raw, exposed, and deeply vulnerable. "Where did you get this?" Liam's voice came out broken, barely a squeak. "I commissioned it 3 years ago," Damian answered, pushing off the doorframe and moving into the room with his silent, predatory grace. "From a master luthier in Alusha, Italy. I gave him very specific, exact measurements. They had to be perfect." "My measurements," Liam breathed, his hand shaking violently against the neck of the cello. "Why?" Damian was quiet for a long, heavy moment. He walked over and stood by the window, looking out at the rising sun. "I saw you perform once. 5 years ago," Damian said softly, the confession pulling the air from the room. Liam couldn't breathe. 5 years. "It was at an underground venue in the art district," Damian continued, his voice laced with a distant nostalgia. "The kind of place that doesn't advertise, that only exists if you know exactly where to look. I was there on business. I was meeting a man I ended up killing 3 hours later. But then, you walked out onto the stage." Damian stopped, a muscle jumping in his jaw. Pain, longing, and something far too complicated to name flickered across his sharp features. "You played Elgar. The cello concerto in E minor. And I." Damian finally turned his head to look at Liam, his eyes burning. "I have never believed in fate, Liam. I have never believed in a single thing in this world that I couldn't control, buy, or kill. But watching you on that stage, listening to your soul pour out of that instrument, I understood exactly why weak men believe in God." Liam stared at him, his mind completely reeling. 5 years ago, he had been 22, still hopeful, still believing his talent could save him from the poverty of his childhood. That performance had been one of his very last before Caleb had swaggered into his life, charming and wearing a badge, promising him the world before locking him in a cage. "You've been watching me for 5 years." The accusation fell from Liam's lips like broken glass. "Protecting you," Damian corrected immediately, finally stepping away from the window and closing the distance between them. "Do you honestly think Caleb's massive underground gambling debts just magically disappeared on their own? He owed money to the wrong cartels. People who would have shot him in the head and made you collateral damage just to send a message. I paid them off. Quietly. Repeatedly." Liam's jaw dropped. "You. The excessive brutality charges from internal affairs that vanished? The evidence that got lost." Damian's voice gained a terrifying intensity. "I made them disappear. I bought the witnesses, I threatened the judges, I kept his pathetic career afloat just to keep him stable enough so that he wouldn't turn around and completely destroy you." "Why?" Liam cried out, tears finally spilling over his eyelashes. "If you had all that power, why didn't you just stop him? Why didn't you take me?" "Because you needed to choose it yourself." Damian's voice cracked, sounding almost angry, not at Liam, but at himself. "You needed to be the one to walk away. You needed to ask for help." Damian dropped to his knees, ignoring the expensive fabric of his slacks, and leveled himself with Liam. "I could have taken you 1,000 times over the last 5 years, Liam. I could have made Caleb disappear into the river, and no one would have ever found a piece of him. But I didn't want to be just another alpha who stole your choices. I didn't want to be another monster keeping you in the dark. I would have waited another 5 years. Another 50. I would rather orbit your life in the shadows forever than force my way into it and make you hate me." Liam's hands tightened convulsively on the neck of the cello. "That is insane, Damian. You're telling me you've been stalking me, playing a violent guardian angel for half a decade. Yes, that's not protection. That is obsession. I know that." Damian's smile was bitter, self-aware, and heartbreakingly sad. "I am not a good man, little one. I have killed men for simply looking at me the wrong way. I have built a blood-soaked empire on violence and fear. But you," his voice dropped to a raw, ragged whisper, "you were the only beautiful thing I had ever seen in my entire life that I didn't want to destroy." Liam's throat burned with a sob he couldn't swallow. This was entirely wrong. It was twisted, dark, and illegal. A ruthless mafia boss confessing to 5 years of surveillance as if it were a holy devotion. A cello worth hundreds of thousands of dollars commissioned for a boy he had never spoken a word to. But as Liam knelt there in the dawn light, holding an instrument crafted specifically for the span of his hands, he realized something absolutely terrifying. This wasn't just a toxic obsession. This was pure, absolute, religious devotion. And Liam didn't know which was more dangerous. "Play something," Damian asked quietly, his eyes begging. "Please. I have waited 5 years to hear you again." Trembling, Liam shifted. His fingers found the bow resting on the velvet of the case. He settled the beautiful cello between his knees. The weight of it was utterly perfect. The balance was divine. He drew the bow across the thick strings, and the sound that filled the penthouse was everything he had forgotten life could be. It was rich, deep, pure, and wildly alive. When Liam finally looked up through his tears, the notes vibrating in his chest, Damian Vance was watching him like a man witnessing his own salvation, or his absolute damnation. And looking into those stormy eyes, Liam realized he couldn't tell the difference anymore, and God help him, he didn't care. End of Part 4. Part 5, The Honest Monster. Liam had learned the intricate rhythms of the penthouse over the next few days. He knew exactly when the medical team arrived in the morning, when the freshly prepared meals silently appeared on the dining table, and when Damian disappeared into the heavily guarded west wing of the estate for hours at a time. He had learned which parts of his sprawling, luxurious cage were essentially his to roam, and which belonged strictly to the dark, dangerous man who kept him there. The West Wing office was Damian's absolute domain. It was off-limits, sacred ground, which was exactly why Liam noticed when the heavy oak door was left slightly ajar. It was late, well past 2 in the morning. Liam had been awake, losing himself in the deep, resonant tones of the cello Damian had gifted him, playing Dvorak until the tips of his fingers ached and his soul felt momentarily light. He had padded out to the kitchen in his bare feet to get a glass of water when he saw it. A thin, sharp sliver of amber light cutting through the oppressive darkness of the hallway. Muffled voices drifted through the narrow gap. He knew he should have turned around. He should have gone back to his safe, quiet bedroom and closed his door. Instead, driven by a morbid curiosity he couldn't quite suppress, Liam moved silently closer, pressing his back against the cool wall just outside the office. "They hit 3 of our shipments at the docks in 2 weeks," a rough, gravelly voice was saying. They executed 2 of our drivers. They made it personal, boss. Liam peered carefully through the crack. Damian sat behind his massive ebony desk. He was perfectly, unnervingly still, in a way that distinctly reminded Liam of a guillotine blade suspended right before it dropped. 3 men stood before him. They were lieutenants, dressed in dark, sharp suits that couldn't quite hide the heavy, unnatural bulges of concealed weapons beneath their jackets. "How many know it was us?" Damian asked. His voice sent a violent shiver down Liam's spine. It was entirely different from the voice he used with Liam. It lacked the careful, rumbling warmth. It didn't even have the cold, razor-sharp precision he had used when speaking about Caleb. This voice was an absolute void. It was an emptiness that swallowed all the light and sound in the room. "The Moreno crew," the rough-voiced man, who Liam recognized as Silas, replied. "Maybe 15 soldiers. 3 captains. It's a family operation. 2 of the captains have wives. 1 has young kids." Damian was dead quiet for exactly 3 seconds. The silence was suffocating. "Clean removals. No traces," Damian finally ordered, his voice flat. "I want it to look like they completely vanished off the face of the earth. Like they never existed." Liam's blood instantly went cold, freezing in his veins. "And the families?" Silas asked, shifting his weight. "Relocate them," Damian replied without missing a beat. "New identities. Wire enough money into offshore accounts that they will never have to work again, and more importantly, they won't ask any questions." Damian's fingers drummed once against the polished wood of his desk, a single, sharp crack like a gunshot. "But make sure they understand perfectly. If they ever speak a single word about what their husbands did, or who we are, they will disappear too." "And the Moreno crew itself?" another man asked. "Dismantle it from the top down. Anyone who drops their weapons and swears absolute loyalty can be absorbed into our lower-level operations. Anyone who resists." Damian paused, and the silence was surgical. "Make it a public lesson for the other syndicates. I want every single crew in this city to understand exactly what happens when they touch what is mine." Silas crossed his heavy arms. "That's 18 people, boss. Maybe more once the shooting starts. The question isn't how many we drop. The question is how public do we make the bodies. Public sends a message, but it draws the FBI and media attention I do not need right now," Damian said, leaning back into the shadows of his chair. Liam caught his profile, beautiful and terrible, like an ancient, vengeful god carved out of black ice. "Quiet removals. Stage accidents. Gas leaks, drunk driving crashes, overdoses. Space them out over 2 weeks, so it looks like a streak of incredibly bad luck, not a systematic execution. Understood. Understood." Damian's voice sharpened into a blade. "If anyone fucks this up, if there is even a single whisper that leads the feds back to my front door, you will be digging your own graves. Are we crystal clear?" "Crystal, boss." This was the Reaper. This was not the man who had carefully changed Liam's bandages with incredibly gentle, trembling hands. This was not the man who had bought off his abusive husband's debts for 5 years just to ensure Liam's safety. This was the terrifying monster who had built an empire on mountains of corpses, who orchestrated mass murder with the same casual tone someone might use to order a coffee. Liam's hand trembled against the wallpaper. The meeting was abruptly adjourned. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Liam barely managed to slip backward into the deep shadows of an alcove before the 3 massive men filed out into the hallway. They didn't even glance his way, far too focused on the grim, violent orders they had just received and the 18 lives they were about to brutally extinguish. When absolute silence settled over the penthouse once more, Liam knew he should run. He should sprint back to his bedroom, pull the covers over his head, and pretend he was ignorant of the blood soaking the foundation of his gilded cage. Instead, he pushed the heavy oak door fully open and stepped into the lion's den. Damian didn't even look up from the leather-bound ledger he was currently writing in. "How long were you listening in the hall?" Liam's throat was bone dry. He swallowed hard. "Long enough." "Good." Damian slowly set his gold fountain pen down and finally lifted his gaze to meet Liam's terrified eyes. "You should know exactly what I am. I will not insult your intelligence by pretending to be something softer, Liam. 18 people. 18 men who tried to bleed my operations, who thought they could steal from my table without facing the absolute worst consequences." Damian stood up, his massive frame dominating the room as he moved slowly around the desk. I am not going to apologize to you for protecting what is mine, Liam. Is that what you want? An apology. Is that what you call it? Protection. Liam's voice wavered, but he didn't back down. Yes. There was zero hesitation, zero shame in Damian's stormy eyes. This is what I do. This is who I am. The man who commissions a priceless cello for you, and the man who just ordered 18 brutal executions. We are not separate people. We are the exact same monster. Liam wanted to be horrified. He desperately wanted to feel disgust, absolute terror, and a sense of moral superiority. He wanted to scream at him. Instead, looking into those unapologetic, stormy gray eyes, all Liam felt was a strange, terrible, grounding understanding. I know, Liam said quietly. Damian's expression visibly shifted. A flash of genuine surprise cracked his marble facade before he quickly masked it. I don't want you to pretend, Liam continued, the words tumbling out of his mouth before his rational brain could stop them. He took a hesitant step toward the mafia boss. Soft men do not survive in this world, Damian. Soft men don't survive anywhere. They just get used. They get broken. They get discarded. Something painfully raw flickered across Damian's sharp features. Is that what happened to you? I tried to be soft, Liam confessed, his voice breaking. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes. I tried to believe that human kindness mattered, that love and patience were enough to fix someone. Liam let out a bitter, wet laugh. Caleb taught me differently. He beat the softness right out of me. Damian closed the distance between them. He was so close that his heavy scent, frost, smoke, and danger, enveloped Liam entirely. I am not trying to teach you anything, little one. I am just being honest. Liam tilted his head back, meeting Damian's intense gaze unflinchingly. You are a monster. You kill people. You destroy lives. You probably enjoy it sometimes. The dark admission hung between them, stark and heavy. But you are honest about it, Liam whispered, his voice dropping to a soft, reverent hush. You don't dress your violence up as love. You don't pretend that your control is some twisted form of affection. You just are exactly what you are. And that doesn't terrify you. It should, Damian replied, his eyes searching Liam's face. But the man I married pretended to be a good guy, Liam said, a tear finally tracking down his cheek. He wore a badge. He used his softness and his hero status as a weapon to isolate me. He smiled at the neighbors, and then he broke my arm behind closed doors. At least with you, Damian, at least with you, I know exactly where I stand. Damian's expression did something incredibly complicated. It was a mix of dark approval, profound sorrow, and a heavy, consuming possessiveness that might have been pride or might have been grief. You deserve so much better than monsters, Liam, Damian said quietly, raising a hand to lightly catch the tear on Liam's cheek with his thumb. Liam's smile was sharp and a little broken. Maybe. But monsters are the only language I understand now. The silence that stretched between them felt like a treaty being signed in blood, a mutual acknowledgement of their damaged souls. Liam turned to leave, pausing right at the heavy double doors. He looked back over his shoulder. Those families you're relocating? Yes. Make sure the kids get full therapy funding too. They're going to need it. It's already in the budget, Damian replied softly. Liam nodded once and walked out. Behind him, Damian stood alone in his massive office, surrounded by death orders and strategic murders. The ruthless Alpha realized with a crushing weight that the broken Omega he had claimed understood the darkest, ugliest parts of his soul better than anyone else ever had. It should have felt like an absolute victory. Instead, as he stared at the empty doorway, it felt like his beautiful damnation. Liam couldn't sleep. The emotional exhaustion of the day, combined with a biological reality he couldn't ignore, had his body wired tight. His heavy suppressants were due for their weekly renewal in 2 days, and his biology deeply knew it. Everything felt entirely too heightened. The hum of the city outside was too loud, the smell of the expensive silk sheets was too synthetic, and his skin felt far too sensitive. His suppressed Omega instincts were slowly waking up, stretching like a caged cat after a long, medicated slumber. And they wanted things that Liam was absolutely terrified to name. At 3 a.m., he gave up entirely. He threw off the covers and left his quiet bedroom. The penthouse was cast in deep shadows, illuminated only by the ambient, neon glow of the sprawling city below. Liam moved silently through the dark corridors until he reached the expansive outdoor terrace, a space he had discovered on his second day but had never dared to use. It felt too exposed, too much like a taste of the absolute freedom he was currently denied. Damian was there. He stood at the thick glass railing, still fully dressed in his dark slacks and black button-down despite the agonizingly late hour. His large hands gripped the glass barrier so tightly his knuckles were stark white, looking as though he were physically holding back the city below, or desperately trying to hold his own fracturing control together. The cold night wind carried Damian's heavy scent directly to Liam. Frost, rich smoke, and something incredibly raw, dominant, and aching. Liam's heightened senses caught the pheromones like a physical hook in his chest, pulling him forward. "Can't sleep?" Liam asked softly, the wind whipping his pajama shirt around his frame. Damian didn't turn around. He remained perfectly rigid. Never could. Liam stepped out onto the cold stone of the terrace, moving to stand beside the massive Alpha, leaving a very careful, deliberate foot of distance between them. Below them, the city of Seattle sprawled out like a glowing grid, millions of lives, millions of normal stories. And yet, Liam was permanently trapped inside this one. This strange, dark, violent fairy tale where ruthless monsters locked broken princes in glass towers to keep them safe. Why are you really doing this? The question slipped out, sounding much sharper than Liam intended. Don't tell me it's just obsession. Don't tell me it's just about protection. Tell me the absolute truth. Damian was quiet for so long that Liam genuinely thought the Alpha was going to ignore him entirely. Then, Damian exhaled a long, shuddering breath. "When I heard your voice that night on the stage, 5 years ago," Damian began, still staring blindly out at the city lights, "something dark and broken inside of me recognized something deeply beautiful inside of you." Liam held his breath, waiting. "I have built an entire empire on violence, Liam. I am not a good man." Damian's grip on the glass tightened until the thick pane gave a dangerous, groaning creak. "I have done unspeakable things that would make you vomit. Things that would make you hate me forever. Things I can never take back, and God help me, I wouldn't take them back even if I could, because they built the throne I sit on." Damian finally turned his head, his stormy eyes locking onto Liam's with a devastating, naked vulnerability. "But with you," Damian's deep voice cracked, breaking in the cold wind. "Just with you. I desperately want to be someone who could actually deserve this. Who could deserve you. I want to be someone you look at and choose to stay with. Not because you are trapped behind my locked doors, but because you actually want to." The confession hung heavy in the freezing air, sharp as broken glass and utterly impossible to ignore. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. His suppressants were dangerously thin. His biological instincts were screaming at him to submit, to claim, to comfort the distressed Alpha. And every single rational, human part of his brain was begging him to turn around, go back inside, lock his bedroom door, and never look back. Instead, Liam closed the careful distance between them. "You were right," Liam whispered, tilting his head back to look up at the towering man. "You are a complete monster." Damian fully turned to face him now. His eyes were completely black in the shadows, fathomless and terrifyingly familiar all at once. "I know you've killed people. I know you'll kill more," Liam continued, his voice steady despite the shaking of his hands. "You've locked me inside a cage made of bulletproof glass and twisted good intentions, and you have the audacity to call it protection. You stalked me in the shadows for 5 years like I was a piece of art you were just waiting to steal. I never wanted to possess you just to own you," Damian rasped, the raw agony in his voice physically hurting Liam's chest. "I wanted to deserve you. There is a fundamental difference." "Is there?" Liam challenged softly. "I don't know." Damian let out a broken, desperate laugh, dragging a shaking hand through his perfect hair. "I don't know a damn thing anymore, Liam. Except that I would gladly burn this entire fucking city to the ground just to keep you safe from harm. And that absolute lack of control terrifies me more than anything I have ever faced in my entire life." Liam stepped directly into Damian's space. He was close enough now to feel the intense, radiating heat coming off the Alpha's massive body. Close enough to be entirely consumed by the heavy scent of frost and possession. Close enough to clearly see the violent war raging behind those winter eyes. "You're my monster," Liam breathed, his omega biology finally snapping its leash. Something foundational cracked wide open in Damian's expression. "Mine," Liam repeated fiercely, and he grabbed the lapels of Damian's dark shirt, pulled the massive man down, and kissed him. For half a terrified second, Damian was completely frozen, rigid as stone. Then, with a low, guttural growl that vibrated straight through Liam's bones, Damian's large hands came up. He didn't grab, he cradled. He held Liam's face as if he were holding something holy, precious, and easily broken. The kiss was inevitable. It was dangerous, desperate, and achingly, overwhelmingly tender. It was the physical manifestation of everything Liam had been desperately trying not to want for the past 5 days. Damian tasted like dark smoke, expensive whiskey, pure sin, and absolute surrender. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air in the freezing wind, they were both physically shaking. "This is a terrible, terrible idea," Liam whispered against Damian's swollen mouth, his eyes blown wide with desire. "I know," Damian murmured, his thumb reverently tracing the high crest of Liam's cheekbone. "You should go back inside. Lock your heavy door. Forget this ever happened." "Should I?" "Yes." Instead of moving away, Liam surged forward and kissed him again. This time, Damian completely lost the war. He made a sound deep in the back of his throat, a sound that lived somewhere between a dominant, possessive alpha growl and the desperate prayer of a dying man. One of his large hands slid to the back of Liam's neck, tangling in his soft hair, angling his head for deeper access. The other arm wrapped tightly around Liam's waist, lifting him flush against Damian's hard, muscular chest. Liam opened for him instantly, parting his lips as if he had been waiting his entire miserable life for permission to fall into the dark. When they broke apart a second time, Liam's suppressants felt as though they had completely evaporated from his bloodstream. His body was practically singing. His instincts were screaming, "Alpha. Mate. Protector. Mine." Every rational thought he possessed was drowning under the crushing, suffocating weight of sheer want. "Liam." Damian's voice was completely wrecked, his chest heaving. "If we do this, if you actively choose this right now, I will never let you go. There is no going back." "Good," Liam said, his hands fisting tighter into the expensive fabric of Damian's shirt. "I am so tired of going back. I am tired of being afraid of the dark. I am tired of soft men who use their kindness as a weapon to hurt me. I am not kind." "No," Liam agreed, meeting those burning, stormy eyes. "But you are honest. And you are mine. And right now, that is enough." Damian's next kiss was entirely different. It wasn't hesitant. It was a deep, violently possessive claiming that Liam felt all the way down to his marrow. His omega instincts rose violently to meet it, fully embracing the biological imperative that should have absolutely terrified him. Instead, surrounded by the scent of frost and fire, it felt exactly like coming home. "Say it again," Damian demanded fiercely against Liam's bruised lips. "Say you're mine." "Yours," Liam breathed, biting gently down on Damian's lower lip and feeling the immediate shudder that wrecked the massive alpha's frame. "My monster. My salvation. Mine." Damian let out that broken sound again, burying his face into the crook of Liam's neck, inhaling deeply over the sensitive scent gland. He smelled of absolute, terrifying devotion. The sprawling city of Seattle burned bright below them, entirely indifferent to the massive collision of souls happening on the high terrace. They were just two deeply damaged people choosing each other in the darkness. A ruthless monster who desperately wanted to be worthy, and a broken Omega who had finally learned that monsters were the only honest things left in the world. When they finally pulled apart, the cold wind whipping around them, the city was still there. But Liam's world had entirely shifted on its axis. "No going back," Damian whispered against his skin. "No going back," Liam agreed, closing his eyes and kissing the monster again. Like salvation or damnation, he honestly couldn't tell the difference, and he no longer cared. End of Part 5. Part 6, The Bait. Liam woke to the sharp, vibrating buzz of a phone. It was a strange, disorienting sound because his actual phone had been utterly destroyed by Caleb days ago. The device currently vibrating on the mahogany nightstand was a brand new, highly encrypted smartphone provided by Damian. It had a secure number that only exactly 3 people in the world possessed. Liam reached for it in the pre-dawn darkness, his body still heavy with sleep and lingering exhaustion. The sheets were tangled around his waist, still holding the faint, intoxicating scent of frost and cedar from when Damian had carried him back inside the night before. The bright screen illuminated Liam's face. The message was from an unknown number. There was an image file attached, loading slowly over the encrypted network. Liam rubbed his eyes, waiting for the pixels to clear. When they did, his entire world completely and violently ended. It was Daniel, his baby brother. He wasn't a baby anymore, of course. Daniel was 22, in his final year of an engineering degree at a university across the state. But in Liam's mind, he was still the bright-eyed kid he had practically raised. In the photograph, Daniel was bound to a heavy metal chair in what looked like a dark, abandoned industrial warehouse. Thick, silver duct tape was plastered brutally across his mouth. Dark, drying blood matted the side of his temple, trailing down his jawline. His eyes were blown wide with a sheer, paralyzing terror that Liam knew intimately. It was the exact same terror Liam had worn on his own face for the last 2 years. And standing just behind Daniel, half obscured in the creeping shadows but unmistakable, was a man with a smile sharp enough to cut through solid glass. Caleb. Beneath the horrific image, a single text message glowed in stark white letters. Come alone, or he dies. You have 12 hours. I will send the location when you are in the car. Do not test me, Omega. Liam couldn't breathe. The air in the luxurious bedroom suddenly felt thinner than paper. His hands shook so violently that the heavy phone nearly slipped from his grasp and shattered on the hardwood floor. Daniel. Oh God, Daniel. His brother hadn't even wanted to come to the wedding. He had begged Liam not to marry Caleb, swearing that there was something deeply wrong and twisted behind the detective's charming smile. Liam had been too proud, too desperate for love, and too blind to listen. He had slowly cut his brother out of his life over the last 2 years simply because Caleb demanded it. Because that was what good, bonded Omegas did. Because Caleb had systematically isolated him. And now, Daniel was going to die for Liam's mistakes. The heavy bedroom door slammed open, hitting the wall with a thunderous crack. Damian stood in the threshold. He was already fully dressed despite the early hour, clad in a dark tactical turtleneck and black cargo pants. A holstered sidearm strapped to his thigh completely destroyed the illusion of the sophisticated businessman. His own phone was gripped tightly in his large hand, and his face was a terrifying mask of cold, absolute fury. Don't, Damian commanded, his voice a low, lethal rumble that vibrated the floorboards. Liam looked up, his vision blurring with hot tears. You knew. My communications team intercepted police and underworld chatter 45 minutes ago. I have been trying to pinpoint his exact location ever since. Damian crossed the massive bedroom in 3 long strides and held his hand out. Let me see the phone, Liam. Liam handed it over numbly, his chest heaving with silent sobs. He watched Damian's sharp jaw tighten, a muscle ticking violently beneath the skin as the alpha examined the photograph. He zoomed in, analyzing the metadata, the lighting, the shadows, turning his criminal mind toward the horrific puzzle. He is alive, Damian stated firmly, his stormy eyes never leaving the screen. The photo is recent, taken less than an hour ago based on the timestamp. The blood on his temple is already coagulating, likely from the initial grab. He is not critically injured. Yet, Liam choked out, pushing himself out of the bed. His legs felt like lead, but pure adrenaline was beginning to flood his veins. I have to go. I need my clothes. I have to go right now. Absolutely not. Damian's voice was a steel wall. He is my little brother, Damian, and this is a trap. I am well aware it is a trap. Damian grabbed Liam by the shoulders, his massive hands warm and unyielding, forcing the frantic Omega to meet his gaze. Caleb does not give a damn about your brother, Liam. He wants you. He wants you broken, terrified, and willing to come crawling back. He is using Daniel as bait, and the absolute second you show up alone, he will have exactly what he wants. You, completely vulnerable, and giving him the legal justification to take you back. I don't care. Liam thrashed against Damian's grip. I do. Damian's grip tightened, his eyes burning with a desperate, raging fire. You walk into that warehouse, and I lose you forever. He gets the entire law enforcement system on his side. You will disappear into the state system, locked away in some psychiatric ward, and I will never be able to get you back. Liam violently wrenched himself free, stumbling backward. Then what? I just sit here in your beautiful penthouse and let Daniel get a bullet in his head because it's slightly inconvenient for your grand plans. We will get him back my way, Damian fired back, his voice dropping to a dangerous, tactical calm. Smart. Controlled. I have men gearing up right now. We go in with enough firepower and precision that Caleb doesn't walk away from this breathing. Liam's laugh was a broken, hysterical sound. You think you can plan a full tactical extraction in 12 hours when you don't even know what city block he's hiding in yet? I can. No, you can't. And you cannot promise me that Daniel stays alive while you play mafia strategist. Liam was practically shouting now, pacing the floor like a caged animal. This is my brother, Damian. He is 22 years old. He has never hurt a single person in his entire life. Caleb will shoot him the second he hears your men breach the doors. Damian watched him pace, his expression looking like cracked glass. And you walking in there unarmed will get him killed even faster. I have to go. I could lock you in this room right now. Damian's voice dropped to a terrifyingly quiet whisper. His eyes were pitch black, completely swallowed by his alpha instincts. I could lock the heavy doors, disable the elevators, and chain you to that bed if I had to. I could keep you safe by force. Liam froze. He turned slowly, meeting Damian's intense, predatory gaze. The silence stretched between them like a razor wire pulled taut. You could, Liam agreed, his voice suddenly very soft, very calm. But you won't. Damian flinched back a fraction of an inch, as if he had been physically struck. Because you told me you wanted me to choose, Liam continued, taking a slow step toward the towering alpha. Because you spent 5 years waiting in the shadows for me to choose my own freedom. Because locking me up against my will to protect me makes you exactly what Caleb is. Damian closed his eyes, a look of pure, agonizing defeat crossing his sharp features. So let me choose this, Liam pleaded, placing a trembling hand flat against the center of Damian's chest. He could feel the alpha's heart hammering a frantic, violent rhythm beneath the tactical fabric. Let me choose to fight. Let me walk into that trap with my eyes wide open, because it is the right thing to do to save my family. It's suicide, Damian rasped. Maybe, but it is my choice. Mine. You don't get to take that agency away from me, Damian. No matter how desperately you want to keep me safe in this tower. Damian's large hand came up, covering Liam's smaller one against his chest. His expression was absolute agony. I just got you. I am not ready to lose you to him. Then help me. Liam's voice turned fierce, his omega biology surging with protective fire for his brother. Use your massive resources, your underworld network, your terrifying competence. But help me do this. Do not stand in my way. The heavy silence that followed felt eternal. Liam watched the violent war play out on Damian's face, the primal urge to hoard and protect fighting against the deep, profound devotion he had confessed on the terrace just hours ago. Finally, Damian's broad shoulders sagged just a fraction of an inch. Defeat. Acceptance. Fine, Damian said, his voice rough as gravel. But we do this smart. We do this controlled, with contingencies in place for every single possible outcome. Liam's breath escaped his lungs in a massive, dizzying rush. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Damian pulled out his phone, his thumbs already flying across the screen as he began issuing rapid-fire orders to his lieutenants. If you die in that warehouse, Liam, I am burning this entire city to the ground, and then I am following you straight into hell. Dramatic, Liam whispered, managing a tiny fractured smile. Accurate, Damian corrected, looking up. His eyes were absolutely merciless now. The Reaper had fully returned. But if we are doing this, we are doing it my way. That means you follow my lead. You trust my people. And you wear a wire that broadcasts every single heartbeat back to me. Done. And you go armed. A knife at minimum. A firearm if you know how to shoot. I can handle it. Damian pocketed his phone and crossed the remaining space between them, cupping Liam's face with both of his massive hands. His thumbs stroked the high arches of Liam's cheekbones. And you come back to me, Damian ordered, the words trembling with a raw, desperate weight. Alive. Whole. That is not negotiable, Liam. Liam leaned deeply into the warm, callous touch, inhaling the heavy scent of frost and smoke that made him feel invincible. I'll try. I promise. I hold you to that promise, Damian said, right before he leaned down and kissed him. It was a hard, desperate kiss, tasting like fear, adrenaline, and absolute faith in equal measure. It was as if Damian was trying to breathe his own formidable strength directly into Liam's lungs. When they finally broke apart, Damian's phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. He checked the screen, his jaw tightening so hard it looked like granite. Location just came through from Caleb's burner, Damian announced, his voice snapping back to pure tactical precision. It's an abandoned textile factory in the industrial district. How long does it take you to get dressed? 2 minutes, Liam said, already turning toward the closet. Good. Silas is bringing the gear. We have exactly 11 hours and 40 minutes, Damian said, turning toward the door. That is enough time to formulate a flawless plan, but not enough time for subtlety. Get dressed, Liam. We are going to war. As Damian disappeared into the hallway, barking orders into his comms, Liam stared at the image of his brother one last time. Hold on, Danny, Liam thought, his hands curling into tight fists. I'm coming. Just hold on. Outside, the sun finally crested the horizon, washing the sprawling, indifferent city of Seattle in cold morning light. And somewhere in the dark belly of an abandoned factory, a deadly trap was waiting to spring. End of Part 6. Part 7. The Walk into Hell. The sprawling master suite of the penthouse, which had felt like a luxurious sanctuary only hours before, now felt like a high-tech armory. Liam stood in the center of the room, dressed entirely in fitted, dark clothing that Damian had silently provided. A black, long-sleeved thermal Henley, dark charcoal jeans, and sturdy, flat-soled boots. The garments were practical, devoid of anything that could easily be grabbed or snagged in a struggle. He looked in the floor-length mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back at him. The hollow, terrified boy who had cowered in a bathroom a week ago was gone. In his place stood an Omega with cold determination hardening his eyes, preparing to walk into a slaughterhouse. Silas, Damian's hulking lieutenant, moved around Liam with the terrifying, practiced efficiency of a career soldier. Lift your chin, little Omega, Silas rumbled, his scarred hands surprisingly deft as he worked. Liam obeyed, holding his breath as Silas applied a microscopic piece of medical adhesive to the hollow of his collarbone, attaching a transmitting wire no thicker than a single strand of human hair. He ran the wire down Liam's chest, securing the flat, coin-sized microphone flat against his sternum, directly over his racing heart, before taping it securely beneath the dark fabric of the shirt. Transmitter is secure, Silas announced to the room. Damian stood by the heavy oak door, his arms crossed tightly over his broad chest. He was a statue carved from absolute tension, his stormy gray eyes tracking every single movement Silas made. The air in the room was suffocatingly thick with the Alpha's distress, a heavy, suffocating scent of burnt espresso and aggressive, freezing frost. Check the signal, Silas, Damian ordered, his voice devoid of all warmth. It was the voice of the Reaper. Silas tapped an earpiece hidden in his ear. Comms check. Tech team confirms they are receiving crystal-clear audio on all 3 encrypted frequencies. The signal is strong. It has a 5-kilometer radius, and the battery is rated for a continuous 12 hours. Good, Damian clipped. He pushed off the wall and crossed the room, dismissing Silas with a sharp flick of his chin. The lieutenant nodded respectfully and stepped out into the hallway, closing the heavy doors and leaving them alone. Damian moved into Liam's personal space. He didn't touch him at first, just looked down at him with an expression that was equal parts absolute awe and profound, agonizing fear. The knife, Damian said quietly. Liam nodded. He reached down and pulled up the hem of his dark jeans, revealing a sleek, matte black tactical blade secured tightly in a leather ankle holster against his right leg. It's secure. I can reach it in under a second if I drop to a knee. The firearm. Liam turned slightly, placing his good hand flat against the small of his back. Hidden perfectly beneath the hem of his thermal shirt was a compact, highly modified 9mm Glock. It was lightweight, balanced perfectly for Liam's grip, and fully loaded with hollow-point rounds. One in the chamber. Safety is off, just like you showed me, Liam confirmed, his voice steady despite the massive adrenaline dump currently making his hands shake. Extra magazine is in my left front pocket. Damian reached out, his large hands gently cupping Liam's shoulders. The heat radiating from the massive Alpha was grounding, a physical anchor in the storm of Liam's panic. And the primary panic trigger? Liam raised his right hand. On his index finger rested a thick, unadorned band of solid silver. It looked like a simple, modern piece of men's jewelry. Twist the outer band 90 degrees to the right. Exactly, Damian breathed, his eyes locking onto Liam's with a fierce, burning intensity. The absolute second you twist that ring, it sends a silent, encrypted distress ping directly to my earpiece and to every single tactical unit surrounding that building. You do not wait for permission. You do not hesitate. If Caleb moves toward you, if he raises his voice, if he even looks at you in a way you do not like, you twist that ring, and I will bring the entire roof down on his head. Do you understand me? I understand, Liam said softly, leaning his forehead against the solid wall of Damian's chest. I walk in. I play the broken, desperate Omega. I let him monologue. I let him confess to the kidnapping on the wire. And the second he touches me, your men breach the doors. Not just my men, Damian corrected, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble against Liam's ear. Me. I will be the very first one through that door, Liam. I swear it on my life. Damian reached into the pocket of his tactical pants and pulled out a secondary object. It was small, completely smooth and black, no bigger than a quarter. He pressed it firmly into Liam's trembling palm and closed Liam's fingers around it. "What is this?" Liam asked. "The absolute failsafe," Damian said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "If the ring fails, if your hands are bound and you cannot twist it, if the signal is jammed, you press the center of that coin for 3 full seconds. It operates on a completely separate satellite frequency." Damian leaned down, his lips brushing against Liam's ear. "If you trigger that coin, Liam, the plan goes completely out the window. I do not care about the audio confession anymore. I do not care about ruining him legally, and I do not care about the police fallout. You press that button, and I will order my snipers to execute every living thing in that building that is not you or your brother. I will burn the factory to ash to get to you." Liam swallowed hard, his fingers closing tightly around the small, heavy coin. He slid it deep into his front pocket. "Understood." 5 minutes. Silas's voice crackled over the intercom system. Damian's mask finally cracked. He pulled Liam into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buried his face in Liam's neck, inhaling the sweet, natural scent of his omega, trying to commit it to memory. "You do not have to do this. We can find another way. We can storm the building right now." "And Danny takes a bullet in the crossfire," Liam whispered, wrapping his arms tightly around Damian's waist. "We've been over this, Damian. He expects me to come alone, broken and begging. If he sees your tactical teams, he will kill my brother just to spite me. This is the only way to ensure Danny walks out alive." Damian pulled back, his stormy eyes shining with unshed emotion. "Come back to me. That is an order." "Always," Liam promised, standing up on his toes to press a fierce, bruising kiss to Damian's lips. It tasted like an oath. 10 minutes later, Liam was sitting in the heavily armored, soundproofed back seat of a black Escalade. The massive SUV rolled silently through the early morning streets of Seattle, heading straight toward the industrial district. The city was just beginning to wake up, ignorant of the heavily armed convoy moving through its arteries. Damian sat beside him, his large hand completely enveloping Liam's. He hadn't let go since they left the penthouse. The Alpha was terrifyingly quiet, listening to the continuous stream of tactical chatter pouring into his earpiece. "Team Alpha is in position." A distorted voice crackled through the vehicle's speakers. "North side perimeter secured. We have eyes on 3 exits. Team Bravo positioned on the south side." Another voice chimed in. "Cameras are disabled. Perimeter is clear." "Overwatch reporting," a third chillingly calm voice echoed. "Snipers are nested on the adjacent warehouse roof. We have thermal imaging on the interior. I confirm 3 heat signatures inside the main factory floor. 2 are stationary. 1 is mobile." Damian's thumb stroked the back of Liam's hand, a rhythmic, anxious movement. "The mobile signature is Caleb," Damian translated smoothly, though his jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. "The stationary signatures are Daniel, likely tied to a chair, and a guard. We expected a guard. Caleb is arrogant, but he isn't stupid enough to watch his back alone. Can your snipers take them out from here?" Liam asked, staring blankly at the tinted window. "No," Damian replied, frustration bleeding into his tone. "The factory walls are thick, reinforced concrete, and the windows are frosted and heavily grated. We don't have a clean line of sight until you are inside and can visually confirm their exact positions. Once you verify Daniel is clear of the blast radius, you give the verbal cue, 'I'm so tired of fighting,' and the snipers will neutralize the guard through the skylights." Liam nodded mechanically, committing the phrase to memory. "I'm so tired of fighting." The SUV slowed, the heavy tires crunching over broken glass and neglected gravel. The vehicle rolled to a smooth halt precisely 300 yards away from the entrance of the abandoned textile factory. It was close enough for Liam to walk the remaining distance, but far enough away that Caleb's paranoia wouldn't be triggered by the sound of the engine. The factory loomed in the morning fog like a rotting, concrete corpse. Its windows were dark, shattered eye sockets. The massive rusted metal doors hung slightly open, like a gaping mouth waiting to swallow Liam whole. It was the perfect place for a murder. It was the perfect place for a monster to drag his prey. "We are here," Silas murmured from the driver's seat. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs like a jackhammer. He reached for the heavy door handle, but Damian's hand shot out, wrapping securely around his wrist. Liam turned back. Damian looked physically ill, his storm gray eyes wide and desperate. The ruthless mafia boss who controlled the entire city's underworld was entirely unraveled by the prospect of letting a 140-pound Omega walk into the dark alone. "Liam," Damian breathed, his voice raw. "Please." Liam reached up and cupped Damian's sharp jaw, his thumb brushing over the faint scar on his eyebrow. He channeled every ounce of strength he had, projecting absolute calm for the alpha who had given him the world. "I am not the broken boy you pulled out of that bathroom, Damian," Liam said softly, but his voice was made of iron. "He thinks he is luring a victim into a trap. He doesn't know that I am bringing the Reaper right to his front door. I will see you in 10 minutes. Damian closed his eyes, leaning heavily into the touch for one fleeting second. "I will be right behind you." The entire time. Liam let go, pushed the heavy door open, and stepped out into the biting morning chill. The fog immediately wrapped around his ankles. He didn't look back as the Escalade's door clicked shut with the finality of a vault. His new phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, staring at the bright screen. Walk through the main loading bay doors. Alone. No weapons. If I see a single shadow that isn't yours, I start cutting off his fingers. Liam slid the phone back into his pocket. He took a deep, shuddering breath of the cold, damp air, letting the chill settle his racing heart. He could feel the weight of the wire against his chest, the heavy steel of the Glock at his back, and the cold silver of the ring on his finger. But most importantly, he felt the heavy, invisible weight of a dozen sniper rifles trained on the perimeter, and the terrifying, absolute devotion of the monster waiting in the SUV behind him. Liam Frost squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and walked forward into the yawning darkness of the factory. He was walking into hell, but for the first time in his entire life, he was the one holding the matches. End of Part 7. Part 8, The Confession. The interior of the abandoned textile factory was a cavernous maw of shadows and rusted iron. The heavy metal doors groaned shut behind Liam with a sound like a sealing tomb, cutting off the pale morning light and leaving him submerged in a suffocating, damp gloom. The air smelled of wet concrete, decaying machinery, and the sharp, metallic tang of old blood. Liam stood absolutely still just inside the entrance, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribcage, pressing right against the hidden wire taped to his sternum. He knew Damian was listening to every single beat. That thought alone kept his knees from buckling. Well, look who finally decided to come home. The voice echoed from the far end of the massive warehouse floor, distorted by the cavernous space. It was the silky, arrogant drawl that had haunted Liam's nightmares for 2 years. High above, harsh, battery-powered floodlights snapped on with a loud clack, blinding Liam for a terrifying second. When his vision cleared, the breath was completely punched out of his lungs. In the center of the cleared concrete floor, illuminated in a harsh circle of white light, sat Daniel. His younger brother was bound to a heavy steel chair with thick, industrial zip ties around his wrists and ankles. A wide strip of silver duct tape covered his mouth. Daniel's face was bruised, a fresh cut bleeding sluggishly down his temple, but it was his eyes that broke Liam's heart. They were wide, frantic, and filled with a desperate plea for Liam to turn around and run. Standing right behind Daniel, casually resting a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder, was Caleb. He was out of his police uniform, wearing civilian clothes, but the heavy service weapon tucked into his waistband was highly visible. He looked exactly the same, handsome in a rugged, utterly deceptive way. But now, seeing him without the paralyzing veil of fear, Liam saw the pathetic arrogance masking a deeply insecure, violent man. A few yards away, partially obscured by the shadows of a rusted loom, stood a second man. The guard. He was built like a brick wall, holding a compact submachine gun across his chest. "Danny," Liam choked out, taking an involuntary step forward. Caleb immediately drew his weapon, pressing the cold steel barrel directly against Daniel's temple. Daniel let out a muffled, terrified whimper through the tape. "Aha! Right there is far enough, Liam," Caleb ordered, his voice dropping into that dangerous, commanding alpha register that used to make Liam freeze in terror. "Put your hands in the air. Slowly. Spin around so I can see you aren't wearing a wire." Liam complied perfectly. He raised his trembling hands, ensuring his oversized thermal shirt draped naturally, hiding the small Glock at the small of his back. He turned in a slow circle, keeping his head bowed, playing the role of the broken, terrified Omega flawlessly. "Good boy," Caleb smirked, lowering the gun slightly, though he kept it pointed in Daniel's direction. I knew you wouldn't risk your precious baby brother. I knew you would come crawling back to me eventually. Let him go, Caleb, Liam pleaded, forcing his voice to shake, injecting every ounce of his past trauma into his tone. He needed audio. He needed Caleb to dig his own grave on the recording. You have me. I'm here. This is between you and me. Let Daniel walk out of here, please. Let him go. Caleb laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed off the high rafters. He stepped away from Daniel, closing the distance toward Liam by a few agonizing paces. Why would I do that? He's the only reason you're standing in front of me right now. You thought you could just run away from me, Liam? You thought you could just disappear into the city. You broke my arm. Liam cried out, taking a calculated step backward, feigning absolute terror. He cradled his left arm in its dark sling against his chest. You snapped my bone, Caleb. I had to run. You made me do it. Caleb roared, his face twisting in sudden, violent fury. The alpha pheromones rolling off him were thick, suffocating, and reeked of sour anger. You wouldn't listen. You were disrespecting me, undermining my authority in my own home. I had to discipline you. I am your bonded alpha. I own you, Liam. The law says I own you. The law doesn't give you the right to torture me, Liam sobbed, dropping to his knees on the cold concrete. He kept his head down, tears genuinely spilling over his cheeks, driven by the sheer tension of the moment. Keep talking, Liam thought frantically. Admit to it. Let Damian hear it. The law. Caleb scoffed, walking closer until he was standing only 10 feet away from kneeling Liam. He gestured broadly with his gun hand. I am the law in this city, you stupid little Omega. Who do you think the department is going to believe? A decorated detective or a hysterical, unmedicated Omega who abandoned his alpha? You controlled my suppressants, Liam whispered loudly, ensuring the mic caught every syllable. You kept me weak on purpose, so I couldn't leave. It kept you compliant, Caleb corrected smoothly, a twisted smile returning to his face. Just like it kept those other 2 Omegas before you compliant. Until they got too difficult to manage, and I had to convince them to drop their pathetic little restraining orders. It's so easy, Liam. I flash my badge, I smile at the judge, and they hand you right back to me. Every single time. Liam's heart soared even as he kept his head bowed in mock submission. It was a full confession. Extortion, abuse of power, assault, and kidnapping. Damian had it all, recorded in crystal clear high definition. Caleb's career and his life as a free man were officially over. But Caleb wasn't finished. Now, Caleb ordered, gesturing with the barrel of his gun toward the floor directly in front of his boots. Crawl over here. You are going to kiss my boots, apologize for making a massive mess of my life, and then we are going to go home. And if you ever try to pull a stunt like this again, I won't just break your arm. I will put a bullet in Daniel's spine, and you will spend the rest of your life pushing his wheelchair. Liam lifted his head. The tears were still wet on his cheeks, but the terrifying, paralyzing fear that had gripped his soul for 2 years was entirely gone. It had been burned away, replaced by the cold, calculated frost of the monster who loved him. Liam looked past Caleb, locking eyes with Daniel. He gave his brother a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Then, Liam took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the damp warehouse air. I'm so tired of fighting, Liam said, his voice completely calm, devoid of all tears. Caleb frowned, confused by the sudden, chilling shift in Liam's demeanor. What did you just? Crack. The sound of the high-caliber sniper rifle firing was deafening, amplified by the cavernous acoustics of the factory. The heavy glass of the frosted skylight directly above them completely shattered, raining down in a glittering, deadly shower. Before Caleb could even turn his head, the massive guard standing near the rusted loom jerked violently backward. A hollow-point round had punched straight through the reinforced concrete wall and taken him perfectly in the shoulder, dropping him to the ground in a bloody heap before he could even raise his submachine gun. Caleb froze, absolute shock slackening his arrogant features. For a fraction of a second, his brain couldn't process the impossible reality of the situation. That fraction of a second was all Liam needed. Moving with a speed born of pure adrenaline and Damian's relentless tactical drills, Liam threw himself backward, rolling over his uninjured right shoulder. In one fluid motion, his hand darted beneath the hem of his thermal shirt, closing around the cold, checkered grip of the Glock. He came up on one knee, raising the weapon with his right hand, supporting it securely over his casted left forearm. He pointed the barrel dead center at Caleb's chest. At the exact same moment, Liam's thumb found the heavy silver ring on his index finger. He twisted it 90 degrees to the right until it clicked. The primary panic trigger was engaged. The Reaper was unleashed. "Drop the gun, Caleb," Liam screamed, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Caleb stumbled back, his eyes darting frantically from the bleeding guard on the floor to the high-tech 9mm currently pointed at his heart by his supposedly broken Omega. "What the hell is this? Who is out there? Drop it, or I swear to God I will put a bullet through your knee." Liam roared, his finger tightening perfectly over the trigger, holding the slack just like Damian had taught him. "You don't have the guts," Caleb snarled, his panic rapidly morphing into a cornered, violent rage. He began to raise his service weapon, aiming it at Liam. "You're a pathetic, weak little." The heavy, steel-reinforced main doors of the factory didn't just open. They were entirely blown off their massive iron hinges. A deafening explosion rocked the concrete foundation, sending a shockwave of dust and debris rolling across the factory floor. Two blinding flashbang grenades sailed through the smoke, detonating in midair with a concussive bang that temporarily blinded everyone in the room and stole the oxygen from the air. Through the thick, swirling smoke, shadows moved with terrifying, lethal precision. Red laser sights cut through the dust like glowing tripwires, instantly locking onto Caleb's chest, his head, and his arms. A dozen men in full black tactical gear flooded the space, fanning out in a flawless perimeter. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Caleb screamed in a blind panic, waving his badge with his free hand as he desperately backed away. "I am a detective. In my city, you are nothing but a corpse." The voice cut through the ringing silence like the blade of an executioner's axe. It was deep, completely devoid of mercy, and dripping with murderous intent. The wall of tactical soldiers parted perfectly down the middle. Damian Vance walked through the smoke. He wasn't rushing. He moved with the slow, inevitable stride of death itself. He wore no armor, no helmet. He simply held a massive, custom-built hand cannon resting casually at his side. His storm-gray eyes were locked dead onto Caleb, burning with a rage so absolute it made the air around him feel freezing cold. Caleb's arrogant facade completely shattered. He looked at the dozen laser sights painted on his chest, then looked at the towering, terrifying Alpha walking toward him. He dropped his service weapon to the concrete floor with a heavy clatter, raising his shaking hands in the air. "Please," Caleb stammered, stumbling backward until his spine hit the steel chair Daniel was tied to. "Please, I'm a cop. I have money. Whatever you want, I can get it." Damian didn't even look at the weapon on the floor. He didn't look at the bleeding guard. He walked straight past Caleb, his eyes instantly finding Liam, who was still kneeling on the concrete, the Glock held remarkably steady. "Are you hurt?" Damian asked, his voice softening by a fraction of a degree, though his eyes remained wild and dangerous. "No," Liam breathed, slowly lowering his weapon and engaging the safety. His entire body began to shake violently now that the immediate threat was neutralized. Damian nodded once. He turned his head slowly, finally allowing his gaze to settle on the man who had tormented Liam for 2 years. "You," Caleb whispered, his face draining of all color as recognition finally dawned on him. "You're the man from the apartment. You're the one who took him." "No," Damian corrected smoothly, raising his heavy weapon until the barrel was pointed directly at the space right between Caleb's eyes. "I am the man who is going to completely erase your existence from this earth. But first, you are going to apologize to my Omega." End of Part 8. Part 9, The Reckoning. The thick, gray smoke from the flashbangs slowly settled over the cold concrete floor, mingling with the sharp, acidic smell of cordite and the overwhelming stench of Caleb's terrified alpha pheromones. The dozen red laser sights painted across Caleb's chest and face remained perfectly, unnervingly steady. Damian Vance stood over the broken, sniveling detective like a god of war descended from the heavens. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The sheer, suffocating gravity of his presence was enough to suck the remaining oxygen out of the cavernous textile factory. "I said, apologize to my Omega," Damian repeated, his voice a lethal, vibrating hum that commanded absolute obedience. Caleb's knees hit the concrete with a sickening thud. The arrogant, untouchable police detective who had made Liam's life a living hell for 2 years was gone. In his place was a pathetic, trembling coward, his hands raised in surrender, his eyes darting frantically between the heavily armed tactical team and the massive Alpha standing over him. I'm sorry," Caleb stammered, his voice cracking, spittle flying from his lips. He looked past Damian, trying to meet Liam's eyes. Liam, please. Tell them to back off. I'm sorry. I lost my temper, okay? It was just a misunderstanding. Liam ignored him completely. He engaged the safety on his Glock, tucked it securely into the waistband of his dark jeans, and sprinted across the factory floor toward his brother. Danny! Liam cried out, dropping to his knees beside the heavy steel chair. Daniel was hyperventilating, his eyes blown wide with shock. Liam pulled the tactical blade from his ankle holster with trembling hands and carefully sliced through the thick, industrial zip ties binding his brother's wrists and ankles. The moment the plastic snapped, Liam ripped the silver duct tape from Daniel's mouth. Liam! Daniel gasped, immediately throwing his arms around Liam's neck, burying his face in his brother's shoulder. He was shaking violently, his tears soaking into the fabric of Liam's thermal shirt. Oh God, Liam! I thought he was going to kill me. He showed up at my apartment. He had his badge. He said you were in an accident. I know, Danny. I know. I'm so sorry, Liam whispered fiercely, dropping the knife and wrapping his good arm tightly around his younger brother, pulling him close. You're safe now. I've got you. Nobody is ever going to hurt you again. Who are these people? Daniel whispered, pulling back slightly to stare in wide-eyed horror at the heavily armed men securing the perimeter. His gaze finally landed on the towering, immaculate man holding a hand cannon to Caleb's head. Liam, what is going on? He is. Liam hesitated for a fraction of a second, his eyes locking onto Damian's broad, protective back. The intense scent of frost and cedar drifted over to them, cutting through the smell of gunpowder, specifically wrapping around Liam to soothe his frazzled Omega instincts. He's my monster, Danny, and he's keeping us safe. A few yards away, Caleb was still begging. Listen to me, Caleb pleaded, holding his hands up toward Damian. You don't want to do this. I'm a decorated officer. If I go missing, the entire department will tear this city apart looking for me. The FBI will get involved. You kill me, and you bring a war right to your front door. Damian tilted his head slightly, a dark, utterly merciless smile curving his lips. A war? Detective, I own the mayor. I own the judges. I own the chief of your pathetic department. If I kill you right now, they won't even bother to file a missing persons report. They will simply sweep your miserable existence under the rug to keep my money flowing into their campaign funds. Caleb's face drained of the last remaining drop of color. True, absolute despair finally set in as he realized exactly who he was dealing with. You're your Vance. The Vance Syndicate. I am, Damian confirmed softly. Please, Caleb sobbed, his alpha pride entirely broken. Take him. Take Liam. I'll annul the bond. I'll sign the papers. You can have him, just let me walk out of here. Hearing Caleb offer him up like a piece of cheap property should have hurt. 2 weeks ago, it would have shattered Liam's fragile heart. But now, kneeling beside his brother, surrounded by the terrifying devotion of Damian's army, Liam felt absolutely nothing but cold disgust. Damian's eyes darkened to pitch black. The casual grip he had on his weapon suddenly tightened, his knuckles turning white. You think he is a piece of property to be traded for your miserable life? Damian's voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. You think you have the right to offer me what is already mine? Without blinking, Damian lowered the barrel of his massive handgun, pointing it directly at Caleb's right kneecap, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. Caleb let out a blood-curdling, agonizing scream that echoed off the high rafters. He collapsed sideways onto the concrete, clutching his shattered knee, thrashing violently as a pool of dark crimson rapidly spread beneath him. Daniel flinched, burying his face in Liam's chest, but Liam didn't look away. He watched the man who had tormented him writhe in agony on the floor. That was for the arm you broke, Damian stated coldly, standing over the screaming detective without an ounce of remorse. He raised the gun again, aiming it precisely at Caleb's left kneecap. This one is for the years of terror. Wait! Liam's voice rang out, clear and commanding over Caleb's pathetic screams. Damian froze instantly. His finger hovered over the trigger, but he didn't pull it. He slowly turned his head, his storm-gray eyes seeking Liam out, silently asking for permission to finish the slaughter. Liam stood up, helping a shaking Daniel to his feet. He guided his brother gently behind Silas, who immediately stepped in front of the young man, offering a massive, impenetrable wall of protection. Liam walked forward, his boots clicking softly against the concrete, until he was standing right beside Damian. He looked down at Caleb. The detective was sobbing, clutching his bleeding leg, his face contorted in agony. "Liam, please," Caleb gasped, reaching a bloody hand out toward his bonded mate. "Please, don't let him kill me." Liam stared down at him. There was no pity in his eyes. There was no fear. "Death is entirely too quick for you, Caleb," Liam said, his voice as cold and sharp as the winter frost in Damian's scent. "If he puts a bullet in your head right now, your suffering ends. You don't deserve peace." Liam reached into his thermal shirt and pulled off the microscopic transmitting wire, tossing the small microphone directly onto Caleb's bleeding chest. "You just confessed to kidnapping, extortion, evidence tampering, and domestic abuse on a crystal-clear, encrypted audio channel," Liam explained, watching the dawning realization of complete legal ruin wash over Caleb's tear-stained face. "Damian's team has already sent that recording to the FBI, Internal Affairs, and every major news outlet in the state. By the time you reach a hospital, you won't be a decorated detective anymore. You will be a disgraced, dirty cop facing 30 years in a federal penitentiary." Caleb stared at the small microphone as if it were a venomous snake, his breath coming in shallow, panicked wheezes. "And you know exactly what happens to dirty, abusive cops in federal prison," Liam whispered, leaning down just slightly so only Caleb and Damian could hear him. "You won't have a badge to hide behind anymore, Caleb. You will be completely at their mercy. And I will sleep soundly in my beautiful penthouse knowing exactly where you are." Liam stood back up, turning his face away from the broken man on the floor. He looked up at Damian. The ruthless mafia boss was staring at him with an expression of such profound, consuming worship that it made Liam's breath catch. Damian holstered his weapon smoothly, not taking his eyes off Liam. "Silas," Damian ordered, his voice echoing across the warehouse. "Yes, boss." "Tourniquet his leg. We wouldn't want the detective bleeding out before he can face his arraignment," Damian commanded. "Then drop him exactly 3 blocks away from the nearest FBI field office. Anonymously. Let the feds clean up their own trash." "With pleasure," Silas growled, signaling for 2 of the tactical men to drag Caleb away. Caleb didn't even fight. He was completely broken, sobbing in pain and absolute despair as he was hauled backward through the dust and smoke. Damian turned fully toward Liam. The violent, dangerous Reaper vanished, instantly replaced by the fiercely devoted protector. Damian reached out, his massive hands gently framing Liam's face, his thumbs wiping away a smudge of soot from Liam's pale cheek. "Are you entirely sure you are uninjured?" Damian asked, his voice rough, dropping an octave. "I'm okay," Liam whispered, leaning heavily into the broad, calloused palms. The adrenaline was finally beginning to crash, leaving his limbs feeling like wet sand. "You kept your promise. You came through the door. I will always come through the door for you, Liam. Always." Damian leaned down and pressed a deep, grounding kiss to Liam's forehead, sealing the vow. "Liam." Daniel's tentative, trembling voice broke the heavy intimacy of the moment. Damian stepped back slightly, keeping one arm securely wrapped around Liam's waist as Liam turned to face his brother. Daniel was staring at Damian with a mix of awe and profound terror. "Daniel," Damian spoke, his voice polite but firm. "I am Damian Vance. I understand you have been through a horrific ordeal today, but I assure you, you are perfectly safe now. My men will escort you to a secure location where a medical team is waiting to look at that cut on your head." "I want to stay with Liam," Daniel said stubbornly, taking a step forward despite his trembling legs. "And you will," Damian assured him smoothly, guiding Liam toward the exit. "You are coming home with us." They walked out of the yawning darkness of the abandoned factory, leaving the smell of blood and gunpowder behind. The morning sun had fully broken through the gray clouds, casting a warm, golden light over the heavy, armored escalades waiting on the cracked pavement. As they climbed into the plush, soundproofed back seat of the SUV, the heavy doors locking with a definitive, final click, Liam finally let out the breath he felt like he had been holding for 2 years. He sank into the dark leather, completely exhausted. Damian immediately pulled him sideways, tucking Liam securely against his muscular side. Liam rested his head on Damian's chest, listening to the steady, strong heartbeat of the monster who had saved him, while Daniel sat quietly in the opposite seat, clutching a bottle of water provided by Silas. "It's over," Liam whispered, closing his eyes as the motorcade pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving his past to rot in the ruins. "No, little one," Damian murmured, pressing a kiss into Liam's hair as his heavy, possessive scent wrapped around them in a warm, unbreakable embrace. "It is just beginning." End of Part 9. Part 10, The Empire's Omega. 6 weeks passed. The sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse in the sky had entirely ceased to be a gilded cage for Liam. It had simply become his kingdom. The heavy oak doors of the medical wing opened with a soft click. Dr. Evans, the same private physician who had treated Liam on his first night, gently scored the thick white fiberglass of the cast with a specialized medical saw. Damian stood less than 2 feet away. He was dressed flawlessly in a bespoke navy suit, but the terrifyingly intense, unblinking way he watched the blade move against Liam's skin made it clear that the Reaper was just beneath the surface. His heavy scent of frost and dark espresso filled the room, a thick blanket of alpha protection that made Liam's omega hindbrain hum with deep contentment. "Almost done, Mr. Frost," Dr. Evans murmured politely, prying the two halves of the cast apart. Liam took a deep breath as the cool, filtered air of the penthouse hit his left arm for the first time in a month and a half. The skin was pale, completely devoid of the horrifying, mottled bruises that Caleb had left behind. There was a slight stiffness in his elbow, a ghost of the trauma, but as Liam slowly flexed his fingers and rotated his wrist, a brilliant, breathtaking smile broke across his face. It didn't hurt. He was completely whole again. Perfectly healed, Dr. Evans noted with a relieved smile, packing away his tools under Damian's scrutinizing glare. "You will need a few weeks of light physical therapy to rebuild the muscle mass in the forearm, but the bone has fused flawlessly. You are cleared, Liam." "Thank you, Doctor," Liam said softly. Dr. Evans bowed his head respectfully to Damian and quickly exited the room, fully aware that lingering in the Mafia boss's territory any longer than strictly necessary was a dangerous game. Once the door clicked shut, Damian crossed the remaining distance between them. He didn't say a word. He simply reached out with his massive, calloused hands and took Liam's newly freed left arm. His touch was agonizingly gentle, his thumbs ghosting over the pale skin, reverently mapping the healed limb as if ensuring with his own eyes that the nightmare was truly over. "It's over," Liam whispered, reading the dark, lingering fear in Damian's stormy eyes. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around Damian's waist and resting his head against the Alpha's broad chest. "He can't hurt me anymore." Damian's arms wrapped around him instantly, pulling Liam flush against his solid body. He buried his face in Liam's neck, taking a deep, shuddering breath of his Omega's sweet, unsuppressed scent. Liam had stopped taking the heavy medical suppressants 3 weeks ago. Now his natural scent of vanilla and rain bloomed freely, mingling perfectly with Damian's frost and cedar, creating an intoxicating, permanent claim on the penthouse. "I saw the morning headlines," Damian murmured against Liam's skin, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that sent shivers down Liam's spine. The federal judge denied his bail. Again, Liam pulled back just enough to look up into those fathomless gray eyes. 30 years. Without the possibility of parole, Damian confirmed, a dark, utterly merciless smirk curving his lips. "The audio recording you secured was damning. Once the FBI started digging into his files, half of his precinct turned on him to save their own careers. He has been stripped of his badge, his pension, and his freedom. He will spend the rest of his miserable life in a maximum security cell surrounded by the very criminals he put away." Liam felt a profound, heavy weight completely lift off his soul. The monster that had terrorized him for 2 years was permanently locked in a cage, and the monster who had saved him was currently holding him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. "Good," Liam said, his voice entirely steady. He reached up, threading his fingers through Damian's dark, immaculate hair. "Let him rot." A soft knock on the open doorframe interrupted them. Daniel stood there, looking far more relaxed and healthy than he had in the warehouse 6 weeks ago. He was wearing an expensive, casual sweater that Silas had bought for him, holding a thick textbook under his arm. Damian had completely paid off Daniel's student loans and moved him into a highly secure, luxury apartment building completely owned by the Vance syndicate just 3 blocks away. "Am I interrupting?" Daniel asked with a small, knowing smile. Damian stepped back slightly, offering Daniel a respectful nod, though he kept one large, possessive hand resting heavily on the curve of Liam's waist. "Not at all, Daniel. I have a meeting with Silas in the West Wing regarding the restructuring of the docks. I will leave you two to catch up." Damian leaned down, pressing a lingering, heated kiss to Liam's lips right in front of his brother, making no effort to hide his absolute devotion. "Come find me when you are finished," he ordered softly. "I will," Liam promised, his cheeks flushing a faint pink. As Damian's imposing figure disappeared down the hallway, Daniel walked into the room and let out a low whistle. Every time I see him look at you, I swear I expect the air in the room to literally catch fire. That man is completely obsessed with you, Liam. It's not obsession, Danny, Liam corrected gently, moving toward the sitting room and gesturing for his brother to follow. He poured them both a glass of sparkling water. It's devotion. There's a difference. I know, Daniel said, his expression turning serious as he accepted the glass. I was terrified of him at first. I mean, he's literally the head of the most dangerous syndicate in the state. But over the last month, seeing the way he treats you, seeing how he protected me without batting an eye. Daniel shook his head, offering a soft smile. He might be a monster to the rest of the world, Liam. But to you, he's a guardian angel. He's my monster, Liam said softly, looking out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city of Seattle. He no longer felt trapped looking at the glass. He felt like a king surveying his empire. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Later that evening, the penthouse was cast in the deep, sultry shadows of twilight. The city below was a sea of glittering gold and neon, a beautiful backdrop to the absolute silence of the music room. Liam sat in the center of the room, the priceless Italian cello resting perfectly between his knees. For the first time in 2 years, he held the bow with his left hand without a single twinge of pain or hesitation. Damian sat in the shadows of the velvet armchair in the corner of the room. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the sharp, strong lines of his throat. He sat perfectly still, his stormy eyes burning with an intense, unyielding reverence as he watched his Omega. Liam closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and drew the bow across the heavy strings. He didn't play Elgar this time. He played something entirely his own, a deep, resonant, achingly beautiful melody that spoke of shattered bones, dark nights, terrifying choices, and the violent, beautiful salvation he had found in the arms of a mafia boss. The music swelled, filling the massive penthouse, weaving into the very architecture of the building. When he finally played the last, lingering note, letting the sound vibrate into absolute silence, Liam opened his eyes. Damian was already standing. He crossed the room with his silent, predatory grace, stopping right in front of Liam. He didn't say a word. He just dropped to his knees on the expensive hardwood floor, looking up at Liam as if the Omega were a deity who had just descended from the heavens. Damian reached out, his large hands carefully grasping Liam's waist, pulling himself closer until he was resting his head against Liam's chest, right over his beating heart. "I don't deserve you," Damian rasped, his voice raw with an emotion so powerful it felt like a physical weight in the room. "I have blood on my hands, Liam. I have darkness in my soul that will never wash out. I will never be a good man." Liam carefully set the bow down. He moved his newly healed left hand, threading his fingers deep into Damian's dark hair, gently tilting the massive alpha's head up so their eyes locked. "I didn't ask for a good man, Damian," Liam whispered fiercely, his eyes shining with absolute clarity. "Good men stood by and did nothing while Caleb broke me. Good men looked the other way because he wore a badge. The law failed me. The world failed me." Liam leaned down, pressing his forehead against Damian's. The heavy scent of frost and rain completely enveloped them, locking them in their own private universe. "I asked for a monster," Liam breathed against Damian's lips. "I asked for someone who would burn the world down to keep me safe. I asked for you, and I choose you. Every single day, for the rest of my life. You are mine." A violent shudder completely wrecked Damian's massive frame. The last remaining walls of his cold, calculated control completely shattered, leaving nothing but the raw, desperate alpha beneath. With a low, guttural growl, Damian surged upward. He lifted Liam effortlessly from the chair, the priceless cello carefully pushed aside. Liam's legs wrapped instinctively around Damian's waist, his arms locking around the alpha's broad shoulders as Damian carried him out of the music room and down the dark hallway toward their master bedroom. "Say it again," Damian demanded, backing Liam into the heavy oak door of their bedroom, pinning him against the wood with his hard, muscular body. His eyes were entirely black, blown wide with a possessive, all-consuming need. "I am yours," Liam gasped, tangling his hands in Damian's shirt, pulling him impossibly closer. "And you are mine. Mind, body, and soul." Damian captured his lips in a bruising, devastatingly deep kiss. It wasn't gentle, and Liam didn't want it to be. It was acclaiming. It was the physical branding of two broken souls who had found their missing pieces in the darkest, most dangerous corners of the world. As Damian carried his Omega to the massive, silk-draped bed, the heavy doors of the penthouse locked out the rest of the world. Seattle continued to buzz below them, filled with laws, police, and ordinary people living ordinary lives. But up in the sky, in a fortress built on blood and devotion, the Reaper had finally laid down his scythe, choosing instead to worship at the altar of the boy who had texted the wrong number, and in doing so, had found exactly the right monster. End of story. Wow. Just wow. Take a deep breath with me, everyone, because that ending gave me absolute chills. Welcome back to reality, or at least back to our cozy little corner of the internet here at your BL boyfriend. If your heart is still pounding like mine is, you are definitely not alone. Let's just take a moment to really unpack what we just experienced in this story. We started with a desperate text sent to a wrong number, and it spiraled into one of the most intense, dark, and beautifully twisted romances we have ever had on this channel. What really stands out to me in this story is the heavy contrast between Caleb and Damian. Caleb was the classic monster in disguise. He wore a police badge, he had the charming smile, and he played the absolute hero to the outside world. But behind closed doors, he was a coward who manipulated the law and used the concept of a bonded alpha to trap and abuse Liam. He used fake softness as a weapon. And then we have Damian Vance. Damian never once pretended to be a good man. He is a ruthless mafia boss, a literal criminal who does terrifying things. But the irony and the absolute beauty of this story is that Damian was the only honest one. His devotion to Liam wasn't about toxic control. It was about giving Liam his power back. He bought him a priceless cello. He secretly paid off Caleb's debts from the shadows for 5 long years just to keep Liam safe. And when the ultimate test came in that warehouse, he let Liam be the one to hold the gun. Damian gave Liam the choice that Caleb always stole from him. It's that ultimate, I would burn the world down just to keep you warm, energy. And honestly, we absolutely love to see it. But enough about what I think. I want to hear from all of you. Let's have a conversation down in the comments right now. I have a few questions for you, and I will be reading and hearting as many as I can. First, what did you think of Liam's character development? Going from a terrified, broken Omega hiding in a bathroom in part 1, to the absolute king who tossed that wire onto Caleb's chest and walked away. That character arc was top tier. Second, what was your absolute favorite Damian moment? For me, it is a tie between the intimate moment he carefully changed Liam's bandages in the bathroom, or the badass moment he blew the factory doors off their hinges to save his Omega. Let me know yours. And lastly, if you were in Liam's shoes, would you have made the same choice? Would you choose the honest monster? If you enjoyed this intense mafia romance, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel out and tells me you want more dark and thrilling stories just like this one. If you are new here, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload from your BL boyfriend. We have so many more amazing, heart-pounding BL stories coming your way, and you definitely do not want to miss them. Thank you so much for listening, for staying until the very end, and for being the absolute best community on YouTube. Remember to drink some water, take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.